All right, well, thank you, Leona. Well, welcome everybody. I will call the March 16th, 2021 meeting of the City of South Pasadena Mobility and Transportation Infrastructure Commission to order. And the first thing I have on the agenda is the roll call. Leona, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner or Chair Abelson?
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here, but no video.
Commissioner Hughes?
Here.
Commissioner Liu?
Here.
Councilmember Kremeth?
Here.
Thank you. Everyone's here.
Great. Thank you, Leona. I think first up we have the Pledge of Allegiance, and it looks like Commissioner Dunlap is going to lead us.
All right, if you could please stand with me if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the
of
United
the United States of
to the
America,
Republic,
to the
and to
republic
the
for
republic
which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
with
and
liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Dunlap, and thank you, Commissioner Kremeth, for the virtual flag. That certainly helps us look at something while we're stating the pledge. So thank you for that. Next up, we have item number 1, which is public comment. Leona.
All right. So the first one that I have is from Ann Rector. I own a home at 217 Orange Grove Avenue in South Pasadena. My family has lived on this property since 1960, or over 60 years. I am commenting this evening because of the dangerous traffic on Orange Grove Avenue between Columbia Street and the 110 freeway. This approximate 1/4 mile of Orange Grove Avenue has a long history of accidents, reckless driving, property damage, both city and private, and illegal freight trucking, north and southbound. Due to the ongoing chronic safety hazards, including 2 recent horrible traffic accidents on Orange Grove Avenue, I am requesting that a traffic study be completed. Following the traffic study, mitigation strategies can be implemented immediately. Something must be done to slow down the speed of the traffic. Thank you, Ann Rector. The next one I have is from Sarah Aguilar. I own a home at 301 Orange Grove Avenue in South Pasadena. My family has lived on this property since 1960, or over the 60 years. I am commenting this evening because of the dangerous traffic on Orange Grove Avenue between Columbia Street and the 110 freeway. This approximate 1/4 mile of Orange Grove Avenue has a long documented history of car accidents. In fact, not only have 2 streetlights directly in front of my house been taken out by car accidents, but my irrigation system next to those streetlights received major damage. Due to the ongoing chronic safety hazards, I am requesting that a traffic study be completed. Following the traffic study, mitigation strategies can be implemented immediately. Something must be done to slow down the speed of traffic. The next one I have is from Carolina Howe. We own a home at 300 Orange Grove Avenue where we have lived for 4 years. We are very concerned about the speeding, reckless driving, and dangerous traffic on Orange Grove Avenue between Columbia and the 110 freeway. We have witnessed numerous accidents and an untold amount of speeding in this corridor next to our home. Last month, our 17-year-old son heard a horrific accident in the middle of the night and ran out to call 911 and witnessed a car totaled with 4 passengers. Please consider a traffic study to evaluate what can be done to make this a safer area. The next one I have is from Victoria Eaton. My name is Victoria. This is general. Okay. I own a home at 411 Prospect Circle in South Pasadena. My family has lived here for 8 years. I am commenting this evening because of the dangerous traffic on Orange Grove Avenue between Columbia Street and the 110 freeway and on Meridian Avenue. This 1/4 mile of Orange Grove Avenue has a long documented history of accidents, reckless driving, property damage, both city and private, as well as the high speeds on Meridian Avenue. Due to the ongoing chronic safety hazards, including 2 recent horrible traffic accidents on Orange Grove Avenue, I am requesting that a traffic study be completed. Following the traffic study, mitigation strategies can be implemented immediately. Something must be done to slow down the speed of traffic. The next one I have is from Julian Cardenas, I think. The majority of the time that I walk on Drive by Orange Grove Avenue, I see speeding, dangerous merging, street racing, or near collisions. Most recently, I heard and responded to a serious traffic collision on southbound Orange Grove near Oliver Street, not 200 yards from our home. When I arrived on the scene before a PDM fire, I found a young woman bleeding from a large gaping hole in her skull and who had traumatic deformities to her legs. She was partially ejected from the vehicle, disoriented, crying and begging to see her mother. Another young woman was lying inside of a nearby bushes with other injuries. The car they were riding in had crashed into a rock wall, demolished a light pole, and injured a tree before coming to a rest after careening off the avenue. As an emergency medicine student, I firmly believe that improved traffic safety measures, diligent supervision by our police department, and attention by city administration will decrease the amount of human pain and suffering caused by the dangerous conditions on Orange Grove Avenue that have been allowed to persist for decades on end. And then the last public comment that I have is from Frank Cardenas. My name is Frank Cardenas. My family has lived at the corner of Prospect Drive and Prospect Circle for over 20 years. It's the only home our 3 children have ever known. We love our neighborhood and we love our town. To live in our neighborhood, however, is to live with the reality that at any moment, the regular dangerous driving behaviors on Orange Grove Avenue, particularly of southbound motorists, can result in tragedy. Of the many crashes on Orange Grove between Mission and Columbia, perhaps the most gruesome occurred about 4 weeks ago when our 19-year-old son, a trained emergency medical technician, found himself racing from our home to respond to a car crash on Orange Grove just south of Columbia, quite apparently caused by speeding. Our son is submitting as public comment to your commission his description of the horrific human tragedy that he encountered as he assisted 2 women who had been thrown from the vehicle. The latest tragedy is but the most recent indication that the traffic calming measure of a redesigned median about 18 years ago and the installation of 2 new stop signs in the Prospect Meridian neighborhood about 10 years ago are no longer adequate. The situation on and around Orange Grove has gotten worse and the new measures are needed. The time has come to investigate with the city of Pasadena new comprehensive speed reduction measures, including a possible redesign of Orange Grove. Thank you. That is all that I have, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Leona. It's not an agendized item, but in light of the fact that every single one of the comments related to essentially the same issue, I wanted to see if Garrett or Shahid had any initial comments or thoughts in reaction to that. If not, I do.
Yeah, no, we're aware of the of what was spoken about. It was also brought up at council last meeting, so I can tell you staff has been on site and we're working on some short-term measures to bring some awareness to the situation that exists, and we're going to implement those as soon as possible. And then any long-term solution I'll leave to Shahid.
Yes, we are doing short-term measures, but I've been to that locations a couple of times, and the transition, it is something. You have 2 lanes coming through a major intersection, and suddenly we drop the 2 lanes into 1 lane. I think that's not what the motorists expect at that location, which create host of other issues, problem, congestion through the intersection, which eventually leads a cut through the neighborhood. And secondly, the way the transition has been done is done at a curve, at a horizontal curve. That's not the place where a transition should have been done. But unfortunately, there's no good place if we drop the 2 lane to 1 lane at transition. Either we have to take that transition before the intersection, that will be into the city of Pasadena. And then if to do it after the intersection, we need to have 2 lanes coming through and 2 receiving lanes. And then we should have a sufficient warning for the driver that the 2 lanes will be dropped to the 1 lane. So, due to the space constraint, probably that was the suitable location found at that point in time. So we need to do a bigger study. This is ongoing issues. We receive complaints, streets knocked down, every other day. And there's a point come where we can't keep on spending our resources to replace the same street lights over and over again. And those are ornamental, expensive street lights. So we have come to the point where we only replace them at a limited point in time. So at some point in time, we need to turn that into a capital project and study the whole circulation pattern and see what is the best solution. One of the solution may be open it up back to the 2 lanes to alleviate the neighborhood concerns and alleviate the safety. But that's a circulation study which we have to do it. So we need to find some resources and funding to do that comprehensive study and see what the best solution is.
Right. Thank you, Garrett, and thank you, Shahid. And I'll call on Kim. Just keep in mind it's a public comment item.
Just as sort of background, I did not know, too much about this. The only reference I can give to this location is that when they were doing the median, the landscaping discussion came before NREC, which I chaired at the time. And when they explained when they were doing this potential construction and working on it, the whole point of that construction is, as shared with the commission, was that going to the 1 lane was supposed to be a traffic calming effort, because the 2 lanes had supposedly 2 lanes with speeding, and this was supposed to help. And there's supposed to be signage that was clear about, the 2 lanes into 1 lane and all of that, with the median as part of that calming device. So whether that was incorrect or not, but that was my recollection of when that was explained when we looked at the landscaping for the median.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Sorry for calling you Kim earlier.
Okay.
And so I'll just close the loop by saying that the issue raised by all of the public comments is an extremely important, urgent, traffic safety related one, and staff is aware of it and looking at short and long-term solutions. We are aware of it. I am acutely aware of it, and I will certainly make sure that efforts continue to be made to address that location. It's part of the Rogan projects that were implemented almost 20 years ago, as one of the commenters said, and there are a number of challenges with that project and some others, but we are committed to addressing it, and I will commit to following up on a regular basis with staff to ensure that we're taking the action we can. And like Director Abbas mentioned, some of the action we need to take is of a capital nature, and that's going to require city council support and approval. And thankfully, we have our council liaison, Primoth, here, so he's heard you. And hopefully we can all work together moving forward to address it. So I think it's probably all we could say for now, but thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. And next up is item 2 on our agenda is reappropriation of Metro Open Streets grant. And we have a special guest to present to us. And before we dive into that, I just wanted to mention to everyone that Director Abbas is with us for the first hour or so of our meeting, and then he has to pull out. So I wanted to invite the commissioners, wanted to let you all know that, and see if there was anything in particular on the agenda that you wanted to ensure that you had an opportunity to connect with him before we just go ahead with the agenda in regular order. So if there's anything in particular that you would like to reorder, please speak now. Or we'll just go ahead with the order of the agenda as is and proceed. Okay, hearing none. Wes, thank you for joining us, and please take it away.
Thank you. Let me share
Let me give you
slides
permission.
quickly here.
Let me give you permission. Okay.
Yeah, I have permission to share, so thank you for that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Wes. Oh, wrong button. I don't want to share it. Share it. I want to present it. Here we go. My name is Wes Ruderman. I'm the Special Programs Director for Active San Gabriel Valley, and happy to be with you this evening to talk a little bit about repurposing the city's Metro Open Streets latest grant. So the Metro Open Streets program is really designed to encourage active transportation, encourage people to try public transit, support local businesses and create temporary park space. The city has, we've worked with the city to host 2 of these events so far. We were working on the 3rd one. The first was in March 2017. It was the big one all the way from South Pass to Azusa to celebrate the Gold Line extension. And then more recently in 2019, we did the Mission to Mission event connecting the historic San Gabriel mission with the historic Mission District in South Pasadena. And then this past November, the plan was to restage the 2003 Arroyo Fest event, which was a temporary closure of the historic Arroyo Seco Parkway. And the plan was to connect it into downtown South Pasadena this time. Of course, with the pandemic, that we were not able to proceed with that event. And as a result of the pandemic, almost all the grantees were not able to move forward. So in June of last year, the Metro Board of Directors authorized grantees to repurpose their grant awards in a couple of different manners. So one was to do longer term temporary traffic interventions. You could do parklets or other ways to repurpose the public right of way to support kind of economic activity in a safer outdoor setting. And you could also do things that were supporting physical distancing, education, outreach, slow streets programs. And in a nutshell, the only process was cities or grantees had to submit their kind of requests, general requests. And here in the San Gabriel Valley, we worked with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, which was another grantee, and to repurpose the Heart of the Foothills event, which was supposed to pass through Pomona, Laverne, San Dimas, and San Dimas in April of last year. So what did those cities do with the funding? A lot of them supported their outdoor business program. So Laverne, they closed down part of their downtown to provide lots of space for outdoor dining on D Street. Glendora also did parklets in the Glendora Village, and they did a temporary complete streets project on Glendora Ave, just below the village. San Dimas, similar, requested funds for their downtown to do expanded outdoor business. And in Pomona, very similarly, they purchased K-Rail and supported outdoor business with parklets and additional dining and retail space. Monrovia, same thing in their historic downtown. And they also looked to purchase some crash resistant planters and support with some educational campaigns for residents. In South Pasadena, we worked with staff in the fall once it became, especially with the spike, that an event would not be able to take place, to submit for a couple things. One was to support the outdoor business and vending program for a longer period of time as the pandemic continued, to purchase retractable bollards to protect the Weekly's Farmers Market and outdoor events on Meridian. This is between Mission and El Centro Street, as well as for wayfinding signage, and then for a local slow streets program. And a couple examples of what some of the other cities were doing. So this is in Sierra Madre. You may have seen this on Sierra Madre Boulevard. They converted some of their angled parking to outdoor dining. Pasadena, of course, on Colorado Boulevard and Union Street and Green Street, expanded dining. This is the Glendora Village in downtown Glendora, similar repurposing of angled parking spaces for outdoor dining. And here are a couple snapshots of the temporary demonstration they did on Glendora Avenue south of the village, which was the addition of high visibility crosswalks, curb extensions, and a protected rollway. This is one of the intersections of the south end. Addition of the high visibility crosswalks, it stands out probably the most, as well as the adding of a center turn lane. And what we used for this demonstration was temporary materials, so foil back tape, lane tape, which can be pulled off pretty easily, but actually looks like real paint. It's been in place in Glendora since November, and they'll be taking it down next week. So it's been almost 4 months. They also purchased crash planters, about $25,000 worth of really heavy duty planters that can stop a vehicle and are crash rated, as well as delineators and a few other items, but those are the primary ones. And then with regards to slow streets, for those who aren't as familiar, what was proposed is it's really intended to be a safety reminder as more and more people are out on the streets, walking, biking, etc. Since it was, has been one of the only things people have been able to do. A number of cities, including Pasadena, use a focused request model. LA County for unincorporated, for example, Altadena does the same thing. That basically means neighborhoods can request to participate in the program. And then they also help provide oversight and monitoring of it. In terms of what was proposed for South Pass, nothing was finalized. What was done was we just looked at the 2011 adopted city bike master plan of more traffic calm streets and listed those. However, the intention was any list would be finalized with the community and with MTech before moving forward. And again, some of the local programs, this is the signage used in Pasadena. I'm sure Donson can speak at length on their program because I know he's been involved with implementation of it. San Marino has done on a few streets. This is near the high school. Your unincorporated Altadena, they've been applying some of their signage a little bit differently with delineators that are glued onto the street in some areas. And Glendale, City of LA also have programs. So these were the streets listed that as potential. So again, those class 3 routes, Diamond, Oak, El Centro, Brent, Oxley, parts of Arroyo Parkway and Rollins Street. And here's just a map of some of those streets that were identified initially as potential candidates. As part of any of these Metro Open Streets projects, we have to do evaluation and reporting. So once everything is formally approved with Metro, and last we heard is it's pending, like it's working its way through contracts right now, is that, depending on the implementation of the demonstration or the temporary projects, things that we generally do include a business survey. So this is often done in person or over the phone. We look at sales data, pre and post implementation, as well as public input surveys, and then we will evaluate that data before moving forward. And for those who are curious about, the future of the Open Streets program, so Metro is gonna most likely release another call for events in a cycle 4. Most likely it'll be in fall of this year, 2021. So the city can reapply to host events or, submit a new concepts. The SGV COG is going to submit for most likely the same event again. And those events will take place in 2022 and 2023. So happy to entertain any questions. My contact information is also here, and you're welcome to send me an email or give me a call if that's easier. Thanks.
Great, Wes. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative. I see that Joanna, our planning director, is with us as well. Joanna, did you have anything in particular that you wanted to present or add at this time?
No, I know that this group is interested in not only the process to get the grant repurposed, but also the process of selecting the slow street. So we wanted to make sure that we presented here as well as to council and to open up to hear early feedback from you. I know that whenever we come to implement the slow streets, we'll be coming back with, for your approval, but we certainly are open to hearing early feedback about it now. And just to let people know, we have Metro has approved the repurposing of the funds. We are, and they've done so by email, so we're allowed to start using the funds. We don't actually have the agreement. That seems to be taking a little bit longer, but we are approved.
Great. Well, that's good news. Thank you so much. Leona, do we have any public comment for this item?
No, we do not.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. Well, thank you both very much. So I'll open it up to the commission. Does anyone have any questions for either Wes or Joanna?
Commissioner Dunlap has a question.
All right, Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you, and thank you,
Please.
Wes, and for the presentation, and Joanna for the update. Joanna, do you have, as far as the approval for the reappropriation of the funds, do you have the details of that? Like, it's like what's included in that? Is it general, or with the bollards is it's going to happen? Do we have like do we have a map with a location kind of showing that?
Yeah, we haven't, I mean, we haven't developed the exact map yet. We wanted to make sure that we got the funds approved, obviously,
Okay.
before we spent any time and effort doing that. But we have a general idea of estimated budgets for different components of the repurposing. And Metro has approved those general categories. So as Wes presented, those are the categories of what we have approval for. And the next step is really to get into the details, like you said, put the program together. We'll come back to MTIC with those details and work with Public Works staff in the meantime to get those cost estimates, sort of narrowed down and more focused.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hughes, and then Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Wes, and thank you, Joanna. Quick question. What is the amount of the actual funds in total?
The original award was for $525,000. It includes a match, which is generally done in kind. So I think the hard funding from Metro is $420,000. And Metro will backfill any funds that were already used. So some funding was, for example, used to do pre-planning for the originally scheduled November event. For example, the development of the traffic plans were completed for that event, but Metro will honor the full amount of the award for the repurposing.
Do we have concern that if we want to do the Arroyo Fest going forward in 22 or so, that we would not get the funds? Should we use all these funds, or do we need to bank any of these funds in consideration for Arroyo Fest?
These are use it or lose it. We were lucky that Arroyo Fest scored very highly as a proposal in cycle 3. So I think it was the second highest scoring proposal in Los Angeles County. So we stand a very good chance. I know Metro staff was very enthusiastic about it, as well as the Mayor Garcetti's staff. They had to provide a letter of support. So there was a lot of enthusiasm to redo the event, and should the city want to resubmit, I would wager money that it would be awarded funding again.
In the presentation packet, it says that we have to use these funds by June. Does that mean we have to actually spend them, or just have them allocated appropriately with approvals?
I believe that's been extended.
Sorry, Joanna, you want to go ahead?
I was going to say, I think it's been extended to the end of December now.
Okay, and then lastly, would we have opportunity? I know you're looking at this, and is the only option we're looking at right now is the slow streets option, or would there be some way to dovetail this into our business district and perhaps closing off Mission for more dining and more retail, potentially closing the whole street for different periods over weekends in the summer? We could really jumpstart, dining and because I worry that if the schools are going to open, that the safe streets that was so popular over the last 9 months or so might not be as popular as we shift to a bit more normalcy. And whether or not that's the best use of the dollars, or is there some other way to envision these dollars in the new way going forward, as people are going to be changing up their routines and kids' activities and such, as we look particularly into the summer?
Those would all be eligible uses of the funding, the types of events you were describing. So they're more anything along the veins of a temporary open streets event or repurposing of the public right of way. The one key is it can't be used for doing projects on private property. So it has to be actually within the roadway or within public space.
So like if we wanted to do, like we envisioned closing off Meridian at one point, or we wanted to close off Mission for temporary for weekends, that we could do.
Absolutely. And I know in the preliminary budget that was drafted, there was the set aside for the bollards on Meridian that could be then deployed for additional events, not just for the farmers market.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thank
I
you.
should add, as well as, traffic studies that would be required. So, Wes helped us put together the proposal to repurpose the funds, and he intentionally included all the activities that you've discussed, but also left it sort of open enough so that we could adjust not only as we get into the details, but obviously as the pandemic conditions change, right?
Right.
So it is flexible enough. And we're really grateful to Wes for helping us build that
Thank
in.
you, Wes. One last quick question. Would other kind of infrastructure items, such as, let's say we wanted to do extra temporary lighting that we could put in, string lights, festive lights that could go Mission and Meridian or such, is that something we could consider for use of the funds? It would also be a safety, it would also be a safety measure potentially too, but it also could be used as sort of a focal point.
Yeah, I think as long as you can showcase a nexus between improving the pedestrian, the walkability, or to supporting active modes, it should be a eligible expense. For some items, if we're not sure, we'll just have to ask Metro staff. Like for retractable bollards, we weren't sure about, but I heard the city of San Fernando was repurposing their event and using retractable bollards, and that was something the city had looked to do for quite some time. So that's why that was looked at. For Glendora, for example, on their street, they wanted to try something out and do a temporary kind of installation. So they had engineering plans done and did a traffic study and had those plans drawn up, and then that's what that demonstration project was. So that's an eligible expense too. We're lucky, we really did our most, and it helped that the COG had already submitted the request last fall. We saw what worked for them and how to get it through. So we worded it with plenty of space for the community and the commission to shape it and make sure it was flexible based on the conditions at the time.
Yeah, because if you think about even El Centro, when they do the farmers market, that parts of El Centro without the farmers, without them breathing, is really dark. It has a tendency to be on the dark side. So adding some lighting or something for that area, we could open up more, might be something that would, in the long term, could be very beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Fisher has been patiently waiting. Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you. Interesting presentation, Wes. You identified a lot of uses of the funding, and there appears to be a lot of flexibility. One of the uses that you identified was to display signs in the neighborhood streets and on the collector streets that advise drivers to drive slow and respect the communities they're driving through. And you also indicated that there were reporting requirements for each of the projects implemented. So what I'm wondering is one of the things that we report if we were to display these signs on neighborhood streets is to measure if these signs had any effect in slowing traffic through the neighborhoods.
Yeah, that certainly could be something we could look at, and maybe Donson can speak to that as well if Pasadena has tried to evaluate impacts on average speeds. But once the programs are finalized, we'll try to develop an evaluation program that will measure the things that we want to measure, and we love to hear your suggestions and input on that in terms of setting that up so that we can evaluate and hopefully complete the program with good information to share with the community so they can decide what, if anything, the community would like to see continued.
Commissioner Fisher, I think I can jump in real quick with a answer to that question of whether the signs are effective. In Pasadena's experience, we've noticed a drop in speed about maybe 2 to 3 miles an hour in the first month, but the returns quickly diminish after about the 2-month period as residents get used to the signs. So these signs are definitely not a permanent solution, or they're not very long lasting. So there's that to consider when putting together a slow streets program.
Interesting, thank you.
Councilmember Primuth.
Yes, I'd like to ask about this fourth round of funding. Is it open streets focused, or would it also allow safe streets and active transport kinds of projects, or would those not score as highly? I know you said that San Gabriel Valley COG is resubmitted for, I guess it's the Heart of the Foothills event. And you talked highly of our Arroyo Fest. Give us an idea of whether the fourth round would be able to continue a program that we began in the Safe Streets program, because these signs will eventually, deteriorate, and we might need to replace them. And, finding a revenue source to maintain the kinds of infrastructure we're putting in a Safe Street program, we're going to have to find revenue sources for that. So is the fourth round potentially that?
Each round, Metro has adjusted the program somewhat. For example, in cycle 3, they really gave more emphasis to innovative projects. They wanted to see people, for example, try an evening open streets event. They also put more emphasis on projects that pass through quote unquote disadvantaged communities, as well as projects that touch communities that had never hosted an open streets event before. So the one thing we've learned is the program is malleable. If you provide feedback or comment suggestions to Metro staff before they release it, there is an opportunity to shape the final call for projects. And the next few months would be a great time to do those sorts of things. And yeah, absolutely, they changed the project to allow these interventions due to the pandemic. And I would, my experience is that there could be an opportunity to do so here if that's something you all would like to see, or just have a bit more flexibility. But traditionally, it's been very much open streets focused just for a day, but they'd like to see things like maybe have a shorter event, but have it every Sunday for a month, versus we spend a year to do a really big giant event generally, or even more than a year sometimes. But happy to connect you with Metro staff regarding that, so that suggestions can be shared.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, oh wait, I see more hands. Commissioner Dunlap.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, as people talk, I get more and more ideas, more and more questions. So the ideas that were presented, you presented the total grant amount was like a little over $500,000, correct? Are all of those items budgeted, like covered in that amount? Or
yeah, I think, for example, the bollards, and Garrett probably can speak to this too. The city already solicited quotes for bollards, and it was, I want to say $60,000.
So it's budgeted in that amount.
So yeah, there are buckets for each of these items. And for slow streets, it wasn't that was the cheapest one, because it's, just signage.
Okay, because I would advise that we prioritize whichever ones will give us the long-term benefits, and I think bollards would be of that nature, that we would get use way beyond this year. As far as like the sign goes with the slow street sign, I know that kind of working closely with the person maintaining that program at my own agency, it's a good bit of work. The signs get knocked down, and field staff are having to go out and replace the signs, and some people like the signs, some people hate the signs. You put the sign up and people feel, hey, the sign's not working. We need speed humps. We need speed humps. You gave us a sign. We wanted speed humps, but you gave us a sign. And so there are a lot of misunderstandings with the signs. And I definitely think it's a positive thing if that's how the commission feels. We want to proceed, but I think some of the other items, like the retractable bollards and the potential reconfiguration of some streets, would be higher on my priority list.
Thank you. Commissioner Liu, I apologize. Your hand was up before, but it was lost in the trees in your background. So
Oh,
I didn't see it, but now it's
it's totally
down.
fine.
So I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss you.
Oh, it's no problem at all. I believe Wes answered my question in his previous response about the cost of the bollards. So that's
Okay,
it.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll try to pay extra attention there too. Commissioner Hughes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Wes. Have we heard from Metro where they are, what's going on with Ciclavia? Because maybe there's an opportunity for us to tag on to a Ciclavia, because I don't know if they've done the routes this year or planning or when they think they might want to try that again. But we have a great opportunity based on our locale and proximity to LA to look at doing a through York down into Highland Park, East LA potential connection that we could be part of to open it up to, no vehicle transportation opportunity and tag on without not having to spend a lot of money. And again, having the disadvantaged communities. So I don't know if they've done their routes or if you've heard where they are. I haven't heard. I've worked on them, a number of them, and I know they got, put on the back burner because of the pandemic, but that might be something we could pursue without having to use a lot of our dollars and be able to do sort of an open streets event that we could kind of tack onto.
Yeah, we work with Ramel and the Ciclavia staff, Ramel, their executive director, closely stay in communication since they obviously are the leaders in this field in Southern California. The last I heard from them is they were only planning to do one event this year or hoping to do one. They had, I think, 6 or 8 over $1.5 million in events scheduled, including one in Northeast LA, which was canceled at the last minute. It was supposed to happen in 2019. It would have been the first one. Our understanding is that Councilmember Cedillo has not been really a champion for this type of event, to date at least. However, and as a result, that event didn't move forward. Yeah, I think there'd be plenty of interest, including from Metro, to fund an event that connected South Pasadena into Northeast Los Angeles. And Ciclavia, I'm sure, would be interested too in a collaboration. But I'm happy to reach out to Ramel again or connect you if you'd like to see what their latest is. And I know personally, as a father, my kids have been missing out on their events because we love going to those.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. All right, I see no other hands at the moment, so I'll dive in. And thanks again to Wes and Joanna for joining us and presenting. So I have a few questions. So Wes, I think you mentioned at the end of the day, it's about $420,000 that we're getting from Metro to spend on this program. That's right?
That's correct.
And how would you, so basically there's the open streets piece, which I sort of look at as the alfresco piece, and then there's the slow streets piece. Like it seems like there are two sort of major buckets. Is that sound about right? And then it gets more
Joanne
detailed.
and I were working on it. Oh, excuse me. We looked at it almost at 3 buckets. There are the bollards, which the chamber has been working on and fire department have been in discussion for years and years. There was that, there was the slow streets, and then there was the outdoor retail and business piece.
Okay.
But we didn't, explicitly put in how much funding would be for each or like lots of details to allow the city to shift and adjust based on, the circumstances.
So my sense is that the biggest chunk of money is probably going to be dedicated to the open streets, then bollards next, and then slow streets last. Does that sound more or less correct?
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization.
Okay. So this is a loaded question, but so what happens next? So we're here, MTech, there's Public Works folks, there's Joanne in planning, there's you, Wes. So sort of just high level, I don't want to go in the micro, but generally speaking, what happens next and who's involved?
Well, I think there are different ways that it can be approached. I know with, for example, the city or with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, and we were working on coordinating their event. The first thing that was done was the scope of works were modified to reflect the new direction, and those contracts had to be approved. So we'll have to work with staff to update those contracts. And for this, the original event, one was with Right of Way, the traffic control firm, and with my organization. And then the city had funding set aside to cover its costs. So that's the first thing that needs to be updated and improved, the scope of work. And that too can leave space to make sure that, you know, depending on the community needs, more funding can go to one pot or another. And that, you know, has to go before council. I'd say other than that, with the COG, we worked closely with staff to identify the best approach. And then they put out a call to the cities and asked what they'd like to use funding for. And we just gave them a suite, just like we spoke, or I shared previously, like these are different things you can do with the funding. And they pitched ideas, and then we figured out how much budget was left, and we allocated it out and supported their implementation. So for example, in Glendora, our staff came and helped implement the temporary project. We secured purchased a lot of the materials, et cetera. First, in South Pass's case, like we'd be happy to work with, if you want to have an ad hoc committee to support staff in this endeavor, because I know staff is juggling a lot with so many different plans and projects in the works, particularly since commissioners here have a lot of expertise. For example, in slow streets, I already learned something new today about their efficacy in slowing down cars. All I know is in my neighborhood, we have them, and you know, they seem to be helping, but it's great to hear citywide their impact. So that would, I think the two most important steps, long story short, is one, the scopes of work have to be updated and the contracts updated. And then two, we need to refine exactly what the city would like to accomplish, which direction, and work with, you know, other key stakeholders, whether that's, for example, businesses on Mission Street. We know there were some challenges with regards to the initial implementation of some of the outdoor business design. So, you know, if at all possible, we'd like to avoid that and make sure that there's good buy-in and folks have an opportunity to provide input.
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful. And I, you know, because we heard a lot of ideas, most of which I liked, and some of the concepts that either were discussed tonight or were in the staff report that came to the city council. They talked about this idea of closing Meridian between Mission and El Centro, sort of this central area within town for business, retail, restaurant activity. That concept is part of this, right? But is the thought that there would be some study that would be done using part of these funds? Is that it?
Yeah, I think that there was an estimation that we would want to set aside funding, for example, for a design firm to come in and help with the design and implementation of temporary improvements or temporary kind of projects. And particularly, I think with the bollards too, maybe a bit further along, because I know Fire has already looked at this. Chamber's been talking about this for years. So I think that piece is the most baked in kind of the assortment of options so far. But for the others, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to look to do a temporary pilot project on Mission or elsewhere in the city, having a design, you know, a firm come in and look at the traffic, look at and come up with some initial concepts, ideas, get feedback from key stakeholders, from commission, from business community, and then implement it. And you know, the one thing I would say that, I mean, it feels like it's a long way off, but December will come fast. Things take a long time to roll out. So we feel a sense of urgency. I think that's why we've been really trying to encourage staff to move forward, because it would be a shame to leave $400,000 on the table.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we have a COVID-19 ad hoc subcommittee, as it turns out, of Commissioners Dunlap and Liu, who are also experts in the field. So they not to offer up their services, but they're at your disposal. And I think we're all interested in having something implemented sooner rather than later. So we have that subcommittee with whom you can work. We're here. Just chime in on the slow streets. I've encountered them as a non-resident. I react to them as a driver, and I do slow down. I mean, I tend to be pretty careful anyway. But when I see those, it's an extra reminder that, oh yes, it's a residential area. It's a neighborhood. There are multiple uses on these streets, and it's not just about cars and going as fast as possible and getting from A to B. That there's a lot more activity going on. I need to be aware of it. I noticed the Altadena installation first on what I call Christmas Tree Lane. I forgot the actual name of the street, but I noticed it over the holiday when I went to go look at the lights with my family, and I thought they were terrific. But I do understand that they are a maintenance issue, and what I've seen, I've been to a few webinars, and they seem to have some incremental benefit and impact. And what's interesting is there are areas where the neighborhood has sort of been given the responsibility for making sure that they are in place and that they are maintained, and that if there is a maintenance issue, that they report that to the city, so that there's some local ownership of the project. So I think it's a great thing, and it seems like it's a relatively inexpensive piece of this program to implement that would have at least some benefit. And the fact that something's in the middle of the street, I think is equally helpful. Of course, there's also the risk they get knocked, but if people are driving the speed limit, then the risk is reduced. So I support certainly are implementing that. And I've looked at the preliminary list. I know I reacted to it when I first saw it when I spoke with or emailed with Joanna before I went to the city council. And some of the streets make sense to me, some of them not so much. But I'm keenly aware of a couple of streets that are used by many different modes, vehicles, bikes, cars, kids, scooters, strollers, animals, that would benefit from them. Joanna sort of invited this, so I'll just throw it out there. And if we need to have a more formal conversation later, we can. But Grand Avenue between Mission and Columbia, the city limit, is heavily used by cyclists, and it's a wide street, and I think it could benefit from that signage. I think Hermosa Street from Columbia to Arroyo Parkway, which is one of the streets on your list. It's actually Arroyo Drive, I think. It's a narrower street without sidewalks most of the length, which is also used by all of those modes, and it is on a hill and there's a curve. So I think it might be helpful there too. So, and I don't mean to take away from any of the streets you have on your list, and I don't know what the budget would be and how many streets we can do this on, but I think it would be great to include those streets. And then if there are others that either the commissioners think of, or if there's some outreach to the community where they can suggest certain streets that might be helpful. I guess part and parcel with this is, the more we implement, the more we have to maintain, and maybe there needs to be some neighborhood ownership of this, so that there's a partnership between the city and the residents on maintenance. So those are just some of my initial thoughts. And I see Commissioner Dunlap has his hand up, so I'll go to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do want, since you mentioned Altadena, I think, partner on the slow streets partnership with the residents is essential. And, I can speak to the Altadena slow streets as well as some of the ones throughout the unincorporated communities. And really the only way that it is possible is that there are volunteers for each of the slow streets network that are assigned to check on the signs every couple days, and then they report those signs to staff. So it's not necessarily staff having to patrol, but they're informing the staff, and then the office staff can issue a work order to have maintenance replace the sign. So I like that you bring that up, that I think it does need to be a partnership with the residents. And so maybe if planning as they proceed forward, I'm not sure maybe the most appropriate group to work with, but if there's some group in the city that can really help us with this.
Right.
Yeah, I think we agree, and our kind of recommendation would be to do a community request program with staff reviewing to make sure the streets are appropriate and can, you can place a sign on them. I know Donson has had to let some people down who really wanted them on their streets, and I know for my neighborhood, I'm one of the volunteers who has to move them on trash pickup day so the trash trucks can get through the street. So Thursday night, sometimes I have to run out and move everything before they come on Friday. But we're happy to look at that, and as well as open to looking at additional streets and seeing how we can stretch the budget, because it isn't terribly expensive. And one of the things we're going to recommend to support staff is to have a local person also just ride a bike and go along all the slow streets once a day in the community. We can hire a part-time person to do that to help with the monitoring and for the local residents who are also looking after the program.
That sounds great. I think Commissioner Hughes was volunteering for that. Just kidding. Sorry, Shahid, please.
Yeah, so can I make a comment if you don't mind? Have permission?
Please.
So I know we're working with Wesley on this in the past. We have worked on this project, but I have one comment. Once we relook at the state, we should look in the grid system. We don't want to have, but I suggest we should not do one street and then leave the next street, because we divert traffic from one to another. So we look the complete area, and we should have like a grid system, so we limit the possibility of finding a second street where we don't do that. I think the map which you sent us before is made on the same principle, but if we need to add more street, we should look at the other streets on both sides, so just to avoid that possibility. So we may add more street. If we add one street, it may lead up to adding another couple of more streets, just not to shift the traffic onto the side streets.
Good point. Thank you, Shahid. Anybody else have any comments? No. Wes and Joanna, is there anything more at this point that you need or would like to hear from us, or we good for the moment?
From my standpoint, I just want to say, thank you for the input that you've given us tonight. That certainly is a good start, not just about some of the streets to look at, but also just the process, community outreach, and the offer of the subcommittee, because I'm sure we will be reaching out to them soon. So we really do appreciate that. And otherwise, just thank you for the opportunity to present this. I don't know if Wes has anything else.
Just echoing those comments, thank you again for all the feedback. We look forward to working with the ad hoc committee as well as with the rest of the commission. And feel free to reach out in the interim if you have any questions or suggestions, or you have an epiphany for a really great project or something that you think might be an eligible use of the funds.
Terrific. Well, thanks again to both of you for joining us and for the presentation. It's a wonderful project, and thank you both also for all your hard work in securing these funds and keeping them for us and repurposing them so we can create some real benefit for the businesses and the residents. So thanks again. I'm sure we'll connect real soon. Take care. All right. Next on the agenda, number 3, we have the approval of the minutes of our last meeting on February 16th. I did notice as we were talking about the last item, Leona sent out an email with revised minutes. Has everybody received that? I know I sent in just a few minor revisions to Leona this afternoon. Leona, were there any others so
No,
far?
I did not receive any others.
Okay. So if everybody could take a look at the minutes, either the original or the revised, and
So the highlighted areas that I've provided to you guys are where the corrections were made. They've already been made in the document, so you would have to kind of compare the two if you wanted. I didn't do track changes before I did it, so sorry about that.
Sorry, I can't open the file without losing you guys.
Oh, no.
So, but Leanna, you had gotten my original.
I
all my
did.
original-
I did. Yes, thank you.
so I can just share with you, because I'm looking at what I sent to Leona earlier. They were all little, pretty much nit type changes. The only thing that's even remotely significant, I believe it's on page 2 of the minutes, under public comment, the last paragraph, it starts Mayor Mahmood. I just corrected, it said Mayor Mahmood commented about challenging traffic areas in the city, and I believe the discussion was about parking. So I changed traffic to parking. Are we looking at the revised or the original now?
This is the original.
Okay, yeah.
This is the original.
So I just trained traffic to parking there.
then
And
you
the
made
others
the
were
cor-
just like
the correction
spelling and I
here.
can,
Yeah, the correction here on concerned.
right. Yeah, and Trader Joe became Trader Joe's.
That was correct. And then further down, we took out the and added a comma.
Right.
Yeah,
And then
right there.
right under number 6, the first line,
We took out
Commissioner Fisher gave it.
projects.
Yeah, I took out projects. It was just an
Yeah.
extra word.
Yes. And I think that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I would move for the approval of the minutes as amended.
Second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Hughes, a second by Commissioner Fisher. I guess it's to me to go around. So we'll start with Commissioner Hughes.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
She captured all my original changes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm calling the vote. So just,
I'm sorry. Yes.
okay. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Liu.
Yes.
All right. Commissioner Dunlap.
Yes.
All right. And I'm a yes as well. So sounds like we've approved the minutes as revised unanimously in the record time. So congratulations to all of us. Thank you all. So next up, we have discussion item number 4, preferential parking policy. I think I'll turn this over to Garrett.
Yeah, so it was expressed, I think over a couple of meetings ago, and I know that the commissions wanted to look at this. So and specifically was mentioned Pasadena's policy. So I found their policy and their map and included everything I could find. That you all did receive a email with some additional information as well. So to help further discussion. So I will turn it over to the commission for your discussion.
So thank you, Garrett. I'm going to ask, and I don't mean to put Commissioner Liu on the spot. I just thought since we're talking about the city of Pasadena and his parking program, I was wondering if Commissioner Liu, if you had any unique knowledge or anything that you'd like to share with us about the program or how it operates.
Yeah, no, not a problem, Chair Abelson. It operates similar to how the South Pasadena program operates on a day-to-day basis. When neighborhoods suggest a preferential parking designation for their street or their neighborhood, we require a pretty high bar of approval from all adjacent residents to implement that policy. Main reason is we do this mainly in neighborhoods that are overparked. in terms of on-street parking. And the program can be a little cumbersome when it comes to allocating parking permits per residence, because it's common to have households that have 5 or 6 cars and have to park 4, or have more than the existing 3 permits provided by City of South Pasadena. So there's a lot of when it gets down to actual implementation, there's a little bit of work and I would say due diligence on the part of parking staff and our parking office to make sure that residents are requesting the right number of permits. They're not requesting additional permits for a neighbor, that all the cars that they're requesting permits for are actually registered to that address. So it can be a little cumbersome, and that's why there is kind of a high bar to clear that type of program. But in practice, it operates about the same as South Pasadena's.
Can
I was on mute. So thank you, Commissioner Liu, and Director Abbas, please.
So before I leave, so I have a personal experience managing the program in a couple of community. I think South Pasadena program is exactly in line what other communities are doing it. I agree, it's cumbersome program. Those communities who have done this program, they have adequate resources assigned, like Pasadena has a transportation department whole, and other communities. So we need both financial resources and manpower resources to manage this program effectively. So whatever policy we come back, we should keep in mind, there is a burden on the staff, and then also enforcement. If we don't have enforce, the program will lose value. So both financial enforcement and staff management, because it can get very complex once they start. As we expand the program, there are visitor guests on the daily basis issuing the permit, then issuing a permit on the monthly basis. In my previous experience, generally the cities do the program should be self-sufficient, should be able, that's a thumb rule, should be able to pay back for the services which the city provide to the community. And I think that's the biggest discussion which we need to have. And it become, if at one point in time, once I calculated the cost associated with this program, I think we were not able to capture the full investment which the city was having towards this program. We were only able to capture at the most 40% of the cost. So as we develop this program, we will give you, just discuss this program, see where we feel. We will give you more comprehensive examples of the program and from other communities also, what they have done, what are the frequent asked questions, or the community reacted to the program, which is both like in the ordinance and the policy, so then we can pick and choose which best fits. But generally, I think give and take few changes on the fringes, overall the program, whatever I have seen, stays within the same parameter, to do that.
Thank you. And Commissioner Dunlap, I see your hand, but I know Director Abbas has to go, and I just had a couple of quick questions for him. So we do not, just to be clear, as we sit here, we do not have a city-wide program. What we have is 6 or so individual parking districts or plans, but there's no overall policy. That's a question, although it doesn't sound like one. And then the second question is, who currently, specifically, who is administering the preferential parking districts now, the ones that we have?
So this is all mix up. We really have no policy. Whatever the districts we have, it's not consistent. These districts have different hours of parking regulation. The more differential we create, the more difficult it becomes, because now you have a different type of permits to bring, different enforcement, and so it becomes more. So whatever we have a hodgepodge of things, So at this time, it was managed by planning before, by Margaret. She used to manage it. I think she used to issue the permit Our public safety issues are permanent. The program was done, or the evaluation was done by planning, Margaret, and then public safety, I think they are responsible for issuing the permit. But I think in the future, once we fully develop the policy, it should shift towards public works. So at this time, we really don't have a policy. It's just like case to case by case basis. That's why we want to have a policy which we can consistently and uniformly apply to through the city. And we don't have to have one policy for the complete city. Maybe we have a different requirement in the downtown area or those areas which are surrounding the metro stations, and the different requirements in those areas which are surrounding the schools, high school. So we can have couple of variation, but we should restrict having a lot of variation in the timing, because then it becomes very difficult to manage. But we can have, we can group an area and have one variation for one group, and then another area and have another variation which is consistent in that area, district by district. So we can look into those, which is simple. We'll do that. Normally, what we have done, we see a study has to be done and see what is the existing parking situation, because if we move place of parking on one street, the traffic may shift to the next street. They may shift to the next street. So we must not shift the burden to the next street and then to the section. So all these needs that has to be taken into account before we come into the policy. And then we need to set a threshold, which is that what is the threshold which will trigger this permitting process. Somebody need to go out, do a study, how many parking spaces were available, how many were occupied, how many were free, and then come back with a reasonable percentage. If 60% parking spaces are occupied or 70% parking spaces are occupied, probably they will need a permit program. But if only 20, 30, 40% of parking spaces are occupied, then we have to consider whether we go to that program or no. So
Great. Thank you, Director Boss. Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you. I think two questions. One, do we have any public comment that we need to read on the item? That's my first one. And then my second one would be, what's our direction for this item? Like what's the purpose of it being on our agenda? Is this a goal just to discuss and advise if a preferential parking district policy or program is needed?
That's my, I mean, we can see what staff has to say. That my understanding is we're being asked whether we believe there should be a citywide policy.
Okay.
Yeah. In the report, it states that, discuss the item. If we need the policy, then, if we can, time permitting, put together a rough outline of what that might look like, and then, we can move forward.
Yeah, I'll say I do think that some policy is needed. I think it's managing parking well is one of the best ways that you can achieve many social, like economic and environmental goals. Just managing the number of vehicles that come into South Pasadena and where they go, and when you get here, if you do drive here, can you find a parking spot easily? I guess we don't have any data right now to really make that judgment on. I'd imagine, if these districts come into play, we would have more data. However, I know that it's also mentioned in the draft general plan. And so I would suggest that whatever we do, I assume it'll be kind of coordinated with that. I know that there were some strategies in that draft to I think it said to get parking right and to develop a preferential parking program. But yeah, I would just say generally I'm supportive, and I think it's been done in a lot of different ways. You have more improved parking districts, where maybe if you aren't a resident in that district, maybe there's an option through some sort of app where you can pay for a day pass to park in the district, and that revenue can use to fund like the local streets and some of those nice quality of life improvements like pedestrian lighting, enhanced cleaning, and as well as like support the program. But I guess those are my comments with the information we have on the item so far.
That's great. They're very helpful. Thank you. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple things. Garrett, I don't know, I know you gave us the map and showed where the districts are currently, but do we have sort of the background, like what year those were, each one was started, and whether we think what's been the change, what's been the success or the failure of some of these? Because a lot of things have changed. It would be interesting to know, and we might have to dig and maybe Margaret knows, but knowing where we've put these in and are they working? And I guess the one thing I would want to shy away from, and obviously we want to have a citywide policy, but we need to also make sure that we're such a small city, and comparing, looking at Pasadena's structure and much larger, that we don't want to make the whole city, end up having the whole city be, restricted parking. So we just have to come up again, I think, with an overall strategy and make sure that what we even have in place is even what we should have in place right now, if we're going to look at this.
And if I may.
Yeah, Director Boss.
I think that's a very good point. Generally, the cities which they have done, they don't have a citywide program. First of all, we identify the districts, which districts qualify. And most of those districts which are either surrounding a school or a community, gathering places, or transit station places, that's where the actual demands comes in, are the downtown areas where people come, and the vibrant downtown and they come. So we should identify the districts and then work out a specific policy which suits to that district. But I agree, we don't need a policy which goes to all of the neighborhoods, because we're not really experiencing. So it will be only limited areas in the city on which, and we have some requests already pending. They keep asking us, especially in the downtown and the metro districts, they want to expand that area. So we are just waiting. So just to have a policy consistent and uniform, and then we move forward and roll out the program with some threshold.
Okay. Thank you both. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question and then make a statement on the policy. I'd like to ask Commissioner Liu, how many preferential parking districts there are in Pasadena?
That's a great question, Commissioner Fisher. I actually don't have that number. I would need a round number for that, probably less than a dozen. And they're concentrated around Old Town, Playhouse, Pasadena Community College, places that are very parking impacted by day users. Yeah, it's rare. We set a pretty high bar to establish these areas.
Okay, thank you. I would like to emphasize what Director Abbas said, that there's a great expense in administering these districts and enforcing for these districts. When I was with the city of LA, I think when I left, there were like nearly 120 of them. To administer, to sign, to maintain, to enforce. And I think after a while it became symptomatic of a larger problem, that we didn't have a good balance of parking supply for the retail and commercial districts, nor maybe an adequate supply of parking for the residential districts. So I would urge caution in implementing a citywide program and a citywide policy. Maybe we're doing the right thing by having only 2 basic preferential parking districts, one related to the Metro Gold Line and the other one related to the high schools. And maybe we ought to think of preferential parking, in my view, as something very rare and ad hoc, and something you only do on a rare occasion when you have something very different. I would not urge it as in response to development projects. I think we kind of lose the character of the community when we think of it in terms of a program and a policy. I think that now that we have 2 basic areas in the city, we have an example to go from. Should there be a need in the future for one, we have 2 examples to go from as to what we might implement. I would note in some parts of Los Angeles, we would get these preferential parking districts, and you would have 4 signs as you entered a residential community. Street cleaning on this day and this hour, 2-hour parking on these days, no parking anytime these other days, residents in district number 28 exempt. And you'd sit there for 5 minutes trying to decipher the totem pole of signs, trying to figure out, can I park here or not? And sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand. There's also the question of, if I'm a resident here and I'm supporting the community, let's say I go to the Monarcha, I want to get a pastry and a coffee, and I want to be there for 30 minutes, and I park on Diamond Street or Central Street. Am I invading the community? No, I'm supporting the community. So I think we have to think in terms of not thinking that it's us versus them. It's the residents versus the commercial area. We're all one. And this is what helps make the city successful. So I would like to listen to the other comments, but I would like to keep preferential parking small in the city. Avoid expanding it if we can. Expand it only if there is no other option. Make sure we maintain a balance in parking supply in the residential and the commercial areas, and think of ourselves as one community, not a lot of little balkanized areas that are looking out for each other, but not seeing the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Liu.
Thank you, Chair Abelson. I do want to kind of pile on in this urge for caution. One thing that Commissioner Fisher brought up that I found to be worth highlighting is the fact that there is a mix of commercial and residential parking that's natural. And I would really urge caution, especially around commercial areas or implementing preferential parking in residential adjacent to commercial areas, because it can have a chilling effect on the ease of accessing some of these areas that we actually do want to see activity. So sometimes, I would say, street parking around Mission on farmers market days, if it's a little overparked, it's not a real problem. I would say it's not as big of a problem as if we were to implement preferential parking on all the adjacent streets and end up with a situation where we're actively discouraging people from driving to the farmers market if that's their only way to get to the farmers market. Granted, there are situations where the demand to get to these areas is so high that it would be called for, but I don't know if that's our situation in South Pasadena. That's all I have as a comment. Thank you.
Great comments from everyone. It's interesting hearing a lot of different perspectives. I'll just add a few thoughts. So looking at the map that Garrett provided, it looks like there are 6 districts currently in the city. One relates to the Mission / Gold Line Station area. One seems to relate to the YMCA. A couple of them seem to involve Marengo School, and then one seems to involve, or a couple seem to involve Holy Family. So there are certainly areas of concentration. It would seem to me like sort of as we developed a neighborhood traffic management policy for the city, or discuss that, and I know it will be going to city council at some point. It seems like there should be a citywide policy to address this topic, so that, and not necessarily to encourage them, the sprouting of them all over the place, but I think folks need to know how the system works, right? And right now, it's a big mystery because we don't have a citywide policy. So as Shahid mentioned, it sounds like there are at least a couple of requests. I can guess where they are, and there may be others who want to know, what is there a process, and what is that process? And the hurdles will be the hurdles, as a number of folks have mentioned. But I think it's only fair to everyone, whether they live, work, or travel through or park in the city, to know what the rules are. And even though we're a small town, and maybe we don't need dozens of parking districts, I think we should have a policy out there so people know, here's how it works, here's what it is, here's what the thresholds are, here's what's considered. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, is openness and fairness and transparency to folks, and having a program is one way of doing that. And maybe it will invite more requests than maybe otherwise, but I don't know by how much, and I don't know if that means that any more will be implemented, but it gives people a way to get into a process and have their concerns addressed one way or the other. So just something to think about. And then I very much like Director Abbas's comments about the shifting, because one of these districts is adjacent to the Gold Line station. I believe it's on El Centro, east of Orange Grove, and maybe it goes to the Gold Line tracks, maybe it goes a bit further east, but there's a time restriction and then there's a permit exception. But Orange Grove Orange Grove south of El Centro, and El Centro west of Orange Grove are not part of that district. And so you can clearly see what happens is those streets get parked up during the day by, I'm guessing, mostly transit users. So they were sort of left out in the cold when that district was established. So I'm with him that if we're part of the conversation, and the consideration needs to be, if we're going to do a district, how expansive does it need to be equitable? And if it needs to be so expensive and equitable that it sort of dilutes the purpose, then maybe that's the result, is that there isn't one. But I think that's an important thing to think about. And then something else to think about with districts, and then I'll be quiet, is if we're going to have them, to Commissioner Liu's point, we need to make sure there's an alternative, right? And Commissioner Fisher's point, if people are coming to the commercial district to patronize our businesses, they need to have a place to park, right? And if we're going to shut them out of certain streets, we need to make sure that we have somewhere else that they can go. So those are just my initial thoughts. I see Garrett has the map up, which is great. Commissioner Liu.
Sorry, keep coming up with new comments, but one thing I've noticed is that the current policy provides free residential permits. I believe there's no cost to some of these residential permits. And I think that may be maybe something that may incentivize residents to want to implement a preferential parking policy on their street without considering the cost of kind of taking away supply from a legitimate adjacent use, such as a commercial district that we do want to support. It's probably something that I think city staff will need to weigh, whether it makes sense to put a nominal cost on these permits, so that way residents aren't fully incentivized to ask for a preferential parking permit when there may not be an honest need for it, as it may not be as overparked as we would want for a preferential parking permit to be justified.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Good comment. And I there are two hands raised. I'm just going to three. I just wanted to pile on real quick, and that was the last comment I meant to make and forgot to, was that I think there need to be respectable fees associated with the program to at least in part support the resources that are required to implement and maintain it. So I'm 100% with you. So I see, let's see, Commissioner Dunlap, I think, was first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I agree with Commissioner Liu about the 3 permits, and it'd be interesting to see some data too on how many residents need 3 permits or use 3 permits. And Garrett, I saw something in the policy about 3 guest permits. Is that technically now 6 permits per residence? Or did I misread that?
I would need to clarify that with public safety. I'm not
Okay,
that familiar with all the inner workings, but I know you can get daily permits, 3-day permits at a time. So from a machine, so it's not necessarily, has huge oversight. And I know the monthly and the yearly permits, public safety does go out and verify to make sure that those are proper. But the dailies and the 72-hour and the 24-hour permits are done through a kiosk. So the oversight is what that is.
okay. Thank you. And I think as we move forward to app culture, hopefully one day that will be electronic where you could just pay on your app. I think I had a friend stay over and I had to get the printer out to print a paper to put in the windshield. I had to find a printer. I didn't have any ink, but and I do want to kind of clarify my comments. I do think that there's a place for preferential parking, and the city, we have some preferential parking districts that I'm sure work well. Yeah, in my support of them, I definitely don't think they should be done citywide, but they should be done. There's special applications for them, and I'm supportive of the cost, and I think I do support just some flexibility with them too. It seems like we do have that in the commercial area. I know there's been talk about if you go to a shop on Mission, for example, I think you can currently park in the neighborhoods for a limited amount of time for free or at no cost to the driver. So and I think when we implement them, I would like to see some way that if you do have a guest, if you do have friends over, that they could just easily obtain a permit, whether that be through an app or pay like a small fee, pay like a $4 day pass or something like that. I think that would be really cool.
Thank you. I think, okay, Commissioner Hughes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick, again, I think we do need, where appropriate, to consider preferential parking, but I would love to know, and maybe like, are the ones we have still workable and make sense the way they're currently configured? And maybe to Director Abbas's or Garrett, that we might need to again look and do a study or do monitoring or see if they're working the way they were working, if they're continuing to be beneficial and they're solving the problems that we know we have, such as the gold line and people taking up the parking during the entire day, that kind of thing. So, and not letting residents be able to park in front of their homes. Or we know over the years, there's been, parking in front of people's driveways and then they can't get out, and we've had that. So I just want to make sure though, if we are going to look at this, that we look at it in its totality and make sure that what we're doing is working, and that if we need to make adjustments and open up to other areas if necessary. And I don't know if they're necessary because we are pretty small, that we do it in a very global way.
Thank you. Councilmember Primuth has had his hand up, so I'll go to him.
I'd like to piggyback on Commissioner Hughes's comments, because I think process is important here. And I think what I'm hearing is there's really 2 approaches, and I'd like to merge the 2. One is bottom up. So let's start with what we have now. We have a collection of parking areas that have a precedent. They were created under certain circumstances. And we may think of it as ad hoc, but there is a set of rationales there. And I think the council would be really helpful to know, what is essentially the criteria that's been used in the past, and can that be equitably applied in other areas of the city? That's more of a bottom-up approach. And then the top-down approach is, let's look at feasibility, the management difficulties, the different incentives and disincentives to having a program and our size. And so I think between the two approaches, you can present the council with a set of recommendations so that we can then go to the public and say, we have a set of criteria that's been used in the past. We have some limits on what we can do because of infrastructure and funding and all of that. And then we actually do have a way to address the public. And I totally understand we shouldn't have a policy that throws open the gates for preferential parking, but we need to be able to demarcate the fair criteria that we can use from the areas where it just is not going to make sense for us.
Thank you. Director Abbas, did you wanted to say something?
Back leave at this time, my party is waiting. So yeah, just one last comment. So far, I have not personally, or my staff has not heard any problems or comments on the negative comments on the existing parking permitting process, So, but I agree, I think we need to monitor because they have a permit, they're free permits, so no problem. The only places where we have some problem is around the school, and that too during the school pickup and drop peak hour timings, and that's for some time, although it's a permanent. There is some streets which are permanent, but by default, the school driving public do park there and over park on those streets. But that's a temporary. It's not an issue which lingers throughout the day. The rest, I think, so far it worked well because we did not receive any complaints. But we can take a look at that with the permanent parking. What is the parking situation in the street? How many spaces are available? How many are occupied?
So, Director Abbas, just quickly before you leave, as we sit here, is there something written down, the criteria that staff uses to evaluate permit parking requests, or is it more just ad hoc?
So I think a year ago, once I was discussing with Margaret and I asked her a question, she was managing, we just discussing informally, what to do with this program, and what I was told, there's no criteria. It's just, on case by case basis. So that was the last discussion we had. So we did not find in our files, but I will check with her once again if there is some criteria which give us a policy directions, how to approach this one. I think that was the reason where it came back that we need to have a policy for going forward. But we'll double check it just to make sure, there's nothing even done, years passed and nobody knows. So we'll check on that.
Okay, thanks very much. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, I was wondering, while Garrett and Shahid are still there, I think our last preferential parking district was created in around 2003 when the Gold Line station opened up. I imagine the one near the YMCA has been there many more years, and the ones near the schools have been there many more years. Since then, do you know if there has been any increase in parking supply to address the needs around the Gold Line, the high schools, the YMCA?
We have never really heard a complaint about a parking supply or demand. Occasionally, but there's not a consistent issues which has come to our notice. If there is a parking issues around those stations, I think we'll be the first one notified. It comes to us, our department, but we have not per se heard that there is an ongoing problem on demand and supply.
But I mean, they were created because, to reduce invasion into the neighborhoods of parked vehicles. So I imagine that if you increase the parking supply, whether it's the high school lot or the Mission Meridian parking structure, that serves to address the need in more in a long-term way.
Yeah. And I think we have sufficient parking in the garage. If we go anytime, I've been there in the garage a couple of times, and I find at least 20 to 30% parking spaces available in the, not before pandemic, not now, was still available in the garage. So garage was not fully occupied, 100% level. At least I made observation a couple of times, and I asked my staff to take a look at that. What is the demand? So we found parking spaces open in the peak hour available in the garage.
I think that was the problem. And I think that's what created, if I remember correctly, that the people were not wanting to park in the garage and pay the money, so that they were parking in the neighborhoods.
Right. That has been a problem, and I think that was the reason they were created.
Is there still a fee associated with parking in the garage? There is. Okay. Well, that's something I guess council can look into. Just to comment on Commissioner Fisher's comment, I think the YMCA parking area is the most recent one. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember that it was in the headlines a few years ago. So I think that might be the last one. But at this point, I think unless there are more comments, I think staff is generally looking for direction from us. Should they be working towards a citywide policy or something different? What do people think, just from a high level? Do most people think we should start looking at some standard set of criteria for evaluating these requests, whether it's a citywide policy or something else? Hold on, let me make sure I get the right person first here. Commissioner Dunlap.
Mr. Boss, there is a citywide policy, right? In there's a permit parking or preferential parking ordinance, right? Like that would be the city's policy, right? Correct? Like current. There isn't?
I don't think so.
There isn't? Oh,
Shahid?
is there? There's
No,
not.
I've not seen, but we'll double check
Okay.
on this one, but I have not seen one.
Okay.
Even if there's an ordinance that just say, it doesn't give any detail, which will really, what are the criteria, what we need to look at that. But I don't think so there's any comprehensive thing written anywhere what we have.
Okay, so there's not anything like in city code or anything like that.
If we
Okay,
had that, we will not have so differential in our parking system, because even if you go to around the high school, those streets vary in the time limits from street to street. So it's not a consistent thing.
okay, thank you.
And that's just to pile on, that's my understanding as well, as there is no citywide policy. It's been done ad hoc, project by project, through city council resolution, and that's sort of why this has come to us. Commissioner Liu?
Yes, I guess to kind of put into quantifiable criteria for establishing something like a new parking district, I think on a high level, this criteria needs to address an actual need. So this would, if a request came in, I imagine, and just spitballing off the top of my head before, I've done parking surveys before as a traffic consultant. And what that would involve is, they're not particularly expensive or time intensive. City staff can do it. And that would basically establish, need for a parking policy in a certain street. And that may involve, being on a street or counting the number of cars parked on a certain street, given the amount of supply, and establishing, an occupancy percentage. So that may be a criteria, like if a residential street near a high parking generator, like on a weekend or, during a school day or something like that, experiences, I don't know, over 85% street parking occupancy, something like that. That could be like one part of a criteria. A second part of a criteria that I feel like would be really important for any parking district is to get buy-in from the residents. And going back to them having a little bit of skin in the game, they'd have to pay some sort of nominal costs. That way they're not just, people are actually requesting or approving of such a district based on need and not want. So it would require probably, I imagine, a pretty high bar. City of Pasadena, we arbitrarily use a number of 67% of all affected residents would have to approve of such a district. We do that for speed humps as well, just because these things are, once they're put in, are hard to take out. Not so much for parking, but for speed humps. But it, in a similar vein, a parking policy like this could affect residents who have friends come over that have, that aren't registered to that address, renters that, are maybe have their car, have to street park and are registered to their hometown because they're only here for a year or two, or whatever it may be. So I think those two big criteria, establishing need and actual overwhelming want from the community, would be kind of like two pillars of criteria for establishing something like that. And those are just kind of ideas that I think need to be cleared before, we consider something like this or establish something like this.
Can I make one last point before I go, if you don't mind? So
Yes.
I think we have two very well-versed commissioner on the commission. They seems to have a lot of experience. If I may recommend that we create an ad hoc committee and let's draw an outline plan, and then we can fill a column, and we should use their expertise in this one. Just a request or a proposal, and that will become our discussion moving forward.
Thank you, Director Abbas. And I have a feeling you're talking about Commissioner Liu and Commissioner Dunlap.
Yeah.
So just since it was brought up, is that something the two of you have an interest in participating in?
What's your billable rate, Johnson? For consulting?
I think we can. We can work with city staff to develop some sort of.
Oh.
Yeah, I do agree. Dodson, you have a good bit of experience, and I have a little bit of experience with preferential parking districts. But I want to make sure that we aren't, stepping over the line of staff.
No.
So let me suggest something. And thank you, Director Abbas, for the suggestion. And Kim, I do see your hand up.
It's okay.
I haven't forgotten. One, Commissioner Liu's comment, I just wanted to tie into that it seems like it's an important piece of such a program, at least with regard to the annual permits, whether it's 3 or whatever the right number is per household, that the cars to whom or to which those annual permits are assigned are registered to that address. That would seem to confirm and ensure that the cars are actually cars that belong to the residents. That's part of the Pasadena program, yeah?
Yes, but we get a lot of complaints about it.
Of course. And then to Director Abbas's point, what I was sort of thinking, and then I'm going to get to Commissioner Hughes, is that maybe what makes sense is for us, because it sounds, like with the neighborhood traffic management plan, staff engaged a consultant who put together a proposed plan, and then we worked with staff and refined it. I wonder whether that's something that we should be doing here. And if people think that's something that makes some kind of sense, that maybe then what we need to do is think about making a recommendation, and it would have to be an action item for another meeting, but a recommendation. Maybe what we need to do is have a follow-up meeting to get some more feedback or information from staff, and then perhaps make a recommendation to the city council that the city move forward with putting together a preferential parking policy for the city, and perhaps that a consultant should be engaged to do that, or maybe it's Commissioners Liu and Dunlap moonlighting. But that's just one procedural way to handle this going forward. I want you all to think about. So with that, Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you. Just one quick thing. I just don't want us to create something then that becomes the new shiny object. Like we create an overall plan and policy and everybody wants it. And I just think we need to almost do again a case by case and with the important criteria, maybe as outlined by Commissioner Liu and Commissioner Dunlap, what those high bars are. So we don't end up, and also to the point made earlier that we know that we can afford and financially handle this as a city, that there's payments involved, that there's, you know, things are checked, permits are looked at, registrations are checked, that all that gets taken into consideration so that we aren't creating something that we can't afford and that we make it overwhelming because it's the new fun thing to do. And I want it in my neighborhood where it might not make sense at all. That maybe even thinking back to the 6 we have, with the world today, do they make even sense anymore? And maybe that, again, a consultant can help us look at that.
So I'm just going to make one comment that if you propose taking away a preferred parking district from a neighborhood, I think you better make sure you have a lot of security. But putting that to the side, so it seems like just to sort of wrap up this discussion, unless there's more comment, it seems like we have a couple of options, right? One is to recommend staying the course and making no change. The second is recommending that we move forward with examining a citywide policy, and whether that involves an ad hoc committee or something else, or maybe there's another option. But I think we should sort of close the loop and come up with some consensus on what we should do. So I see Commissioner Fisher has his hand up.
Well, I was just going to say that I could support further investigating this to see what the threshold criteria might be. Commissioner Dunlap has a lot of experience with the unincorporated cities and in LA County, and Commissioner Liu has experience with Pasadena, our neighbor to the north. And so I think by looking at their threshold criteria would be helpful. I would just caution though that in looking at this criteria, it should be a guideline to start the process, in my view, and not be determinative. I feel if it is, then we may not be looking at other options. For example, I can recall when the Public Works Commission dealt with the Trader Joe's situation. You could argue that people are really affecting Adelaide and the street next to it, and that it might satisfy the criteria for a preferential parking district, but on the other hand, we found other alternatives to address the community's needs. So I think while we look at threshold criteria, it should be general, not determinative, and it should be enough to start the process. But I think overall, you need to look at other options and make sure other options are not feasible or available. And you need to make sure it's for the greater good. So while there could be an impact to the streets around Trader Joe's is one of the trademark businesses of this community. It's one of the earliest Trader Joe's that started back in the 70s. And I think then that we need to just keep that balance in mind as we look at the threshold criteria.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. So, we could talk for hours about this, but at this point, I just want to get back to what staff's asking us, and that is, do we want to further investigate the development of a citywide policy or set of criteria, or do we not? I don't see the need for a formal motion. This is not an action item, but is the consensus, if everybody could just raise their hand, is the consensus that we want to move forward with the development of some set of criteria for evaluating preferential parking district requests in the city? Is that accurate? Right. If you object, just tell me you object. Okay, I'm hearing none. So the next question is what's the right way to go? Should we have staff do a little deeper dive and come back to us with more information? And
I say, Mr. Chair, why don't we keep this on our agenda for the next meeting? in the interim, the two most knowledgeable, if we want to call them a subcommittee, could maybe put together a list of some ideas of thresholds that would make sense for consideration. And Garrett and Shahid can go back and talk to Margaret and do research and find out what order, what were the criteria, if any, or if anything exists, and maybe it doesn't, for what develop the parking preferred areas we have right now. And if, where those came about, if there's any information about that, I mean, we can kind of guess, and then we can at least bring that information together at the next meeting and see what we have. And then from there, we can also say, okay, here's some ideas we have for thresholds that can be incorporated into a potential overall overarching city preferred parking ordinance or policy. And then coupled with that could be potentially a recommendation on looking at it from a financial standpoint and then whether we need a consultant to help bring the elements together.
Okay, so that sounds good. I'm going to make a suggestion because we have a lot of ad hoc committees already.
Yeah.
So not that we can't have another one. I just, these are my thoughts. That maybe the suggestion is that the staff do the additional research as to what the existing circumstances are, and that staff can work with Commissioners Dunlap and Liu in terms of getting suggestions, recommendations from them. And then when staff thinks they're ready to come back to us with just this additional information, it should be an action item for us to decide whether or not we want to move forward with a recommendation for developing a citywide preferential policy. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
if I may, the person most knowledgeable, Margaret, she's still on leave until April. So we'll probably try to bring this back in May, if that's acceptable.
That's okay with me if it's okay with everybody else. It's going to come faster than we thought. So it's already March, right? Great. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you, especially to Commissioners Dunlap and Liu for agreeing to be co-opted into helping staff work on this issue. And I think the more information we have, the better we'll be able to come up with a good recommendation for City Council. So great conversation. Thank you all for that.
A point of process, is this an ad hoc committee? Do we need to officially form this?
I'm suggesting that we not. If it's important, then we certainly can. I'm
Yeah,
just
we-
trying to minimize the management of committees.
We couldn't form an ad hoc today because it's not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
But if out of our next meeting when we discuss this, or we could see if that's necessary.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. So moving right along, item 5, we have, so the next section is commission-led discussions. The first is the SR10 Mobility Improvement Projects Ad Hoc Committee comprised of John and myself. John, is there anything in particular that you want to share and update the commission on?
No, there hasn't been any action during the last month regarding the 710 mobility improvements. Neither Shahid or Garrett have passed along anything to me, but I'm very interested in knowing the progress, but I have nothing that has come to me.
I'll just share what I know. I checked with Shahid the other day, and he is still working on a draft RFP and scope of the study for the SR 110 Fair Oaks interchange. And he will be circulating that draft scope, John, to you and to me when that's ready to be reviewed. And he also confirmed to me that the traffic studies that are contemplated are studies that can be used in connection with an initial study, which starts the environmental review process. So what is contemplated is extremely comprehensive. and is something that we can use moving forward as we proceed with moving towards initial study and then EIR if that's necessary. So I thought that was helpful, but that's still in the works. And I guess I'll make sure that we keep tabs monthly and keep this on the agenda so that we know we're moving forward and where things stand. Are there any comments, questions in that regard? Garrett, anything to add? It's okay if it's no. Okay.
No, you hit it right on the head.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. And and then I will add that related to this, and I don't want to steal Garrett's thunder, but the other related project is the Rogan funded Intelligent Transportation System project for Fair Oaks. An RFP went out, and I believe the date for those bids to come back is imminent. So we should be able to start making progress on that relatively soon. So that's good news.
I want to say the bids are due the end of this week or early next week. I'll have to double check, but that project's moving right along.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have the COVID-19 Ad-Hoc Committee. Our favorite new commissioners, Dunlap and Liu. Yeah, we've already heard a lot about what's going on from Wes, but is there anything you all would like to share with us?
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So Commissioner Dunlap and I have met several times over the last month, just kind of play catch up and learn more about what the city's done for COVID. Just to give you guys a recap, we met with past commissioners Hammond and Znaimer to learn about what they did as part of the committee previously. And we also want to thank Garrett for taking the time to give us an update on the side of what the city's done over the last year or so. We really appreciate the K-Rails. We think they're the best looking K-Rails this side of the San Gabriel Valley. So that's a fact. And we also were able to speak with the CEO of the chamber, Lori Wheeler, to see kind of what the business community was feeling about COVID and kind of what the city's been doing. She expressed her support for the Ballard project. That's something apparently the chamber is very much in favor of. And she has also expressed interest in seeing wayfinding signage for off-street parking in our commercial areas. I'll hand it over to Eric to kind of go over the second half.
Thanks, Johnson. And moving forward, we're thankfully hopefully seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID-19. Maybe some of you have been vaccinated, and it's certainly exciting to see the cases going down every single day. So, and we believe that there's merit in continuing to explore the reconfiguration and mission, maybe as a separate project, as an open streets project, perhaps like separate from the COVID-19 response. Of course, like incorporating the concerns of the local businesses. Most importantly, like we think this would be a safer configuration for the street, especially for bicyclists and pedestrians, and it could provide increased space for dining and shopping if the businesses would have it. And kind of hearing the update for the Arroyo Fest repurposing funds of those funds is exciting, and kind of thinking about like long-term, outdoor dining, reconfigurations. It's paramount that we engage the business community on that. And our next step was really to suggest that the city put out some sort of engagement, outreach, survey or communications to the local businesses. Specifically, we really want to do two things. One, we want to collect their experience on working with the city on the COVID-19 response, and really use that to inform future projects and programs. And two, we kind of thinking about our experience with outdoor dining, we want to identify if there's aspects of outdoor dining that the businesses would like to see the city implement long-term. For example, input on the implementation of parklets where someone can take food or beverage to go. We think that this input would be valuable just in enhancing the quality of life of our own community, as well as advancing one of the strategies in the climate action plan, which is to identify locations where there is support in converting existing public parking to parklets. And then also regarding the restaurants that are offering dining services in their private parking lots, engaging them and seeing if there's some aspects of that program that could become permanent. We understand that that would require a larger discussion with planning, and greater engagement would need to take place. However, I think over the past year, this outdoor dining experiment has demonstrated that, you know, small minimal reduction in parking and a reallocation of parking to a place that's better, or where there is capacity, can really help support our local businesses and our local economy, and allowing for the increased seating at these restaurants. So with that, that's kind of an update of what we've been working on over the past month, and our suggestion to staff to maybe part of the Arroyo Fest funds could be working with Active SGB to engage the businesses on those items. We think you'll need to engage them probably with the Bollards Project and with some of the ideas that we heard today. But with that, we'd like to open it up for any kind of questions or input from our fellow commissioners.
Thank you. That's a great report from both of you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for our ad hoc committee? Councilmember Primuth.
I just need some clarification so I can report to the council. So it's the ad hoc committee's intent to do surveys of restaurant owners and businesses regarding the city's COVID response, possible implementation of parklets, and work with restaurants who may have an interest in, I guess, making more permanent some of the temporary reallocation of their parking to outdoor dining. Is that a fair way of saying it?
I think that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. And we understand that, especially for the parking lots, that might be a larger process with planning. And so maybe that is working with them to even identify a process for that, if they so wish to do that. And the response might be, no, we don't want to do it. We all want to go back inside and dine. And that's feedback we get. I think one thing, working with Lori, she felt that, you know, just sending out a survey might not be enough. And she really suggested perhaps door hangers, or maybe a letter from the city, or maybe someone stopping by and like knocking on the door and reminding them of the survey. In our discussions with her, she seemed willing to kind of assist with that, with pushing out communications and working to engage some of the local businesses.
Great. And Commissioner Hughes, I see your hand. I have a quick question, because if I don't ask it now, it's gone for our subcommittee. And if you mentioned it, I apologize if I missed it. So do you have counterparts either on the planning commission or in planning staff with whom you have connected on these issues?
They probably haven't been able to, because Margaret's out on leave, and her and Joanna are spearheading it. So if they need to get in contact with Joanna or set up meetings, I'd be more than happy to assist with that.
That'd be great, because I think it'd be great for them to work with planning on these terrific ideas as sort of a united force, because I think it involves public works issues and planning issues, and that way we're all sort of, you know, working towards the same goal together. But that sounds great. All right, I'm going to be quiet. Commissioner Hughes.
Well, thank you to both of you for stepping up and doing such a great job at looking at this from a global perspective for our businesses and the restaurants and such. I had a quick question. When talking to the chamber, we've obviously lost some of our music eclectic festival and some of those activities that have been so important for the city. But I know that they've tried to do a couple things, like this Saturday night is the bingo night to try to help. And I know the SPEF is doing tomorrow the virtual beer tasting with mamas and such. Are there other things that could be done, or is there a way to even think about how we could collectively support all the businesses or put them together and promote. Again, maybe closing off Mission, and then couldn't any of the money from the Arroyo Fest potentially, I guess it's a Garrett question or a Joanna question, be used also to help promote some of those activities, meaning that a lot of times the chamber needs to run something in the Review or the South Pasadenan, and that's expensive and that's funding. And could money go to those kind of things to promote those activities, like a special dining Saturday or Sunday, or a special shopping and dining day, or things like that that they could promote as we continue to go forward?
Commissioner Hughes, I will follow up with Wes and see if that's something we can do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will add, we also were able to touch base with Wes, and he has some great ideas for, activations for that space. I think some of the ideas from this commission have been to close Meridian perhaps on a temporary basis every now and then, and you can do more outdoor events. And I think that would be really exciting to see, and hopefully bring a lot of people back to more people to Mission.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to ask or share? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Commissioners Dunlap and Lou. What a bang up job so far. We really appreciate your help with this. Can't wait to hear what you have for us next month. So let's see, next up, item 7, Ramona Avenue Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan Ad Hoc Committee. So it's John and I. I'll just share what I have, and then John, please feel free to chime in. So John and I went out into the field. It was a week and a half ago, and surveyed the streets. We met with former Commissioner Michelle Hammond, who had some input for us. She formerly resided in the neighborhood there. And we walked around, looked at the plan, looked at the potential issues and concerns, came up with some initial thoughts and suggestions. And then John also went out on a weekday morning, I think a rainy weekday morning at that, to take a look at the Holy Family Church school traffic, and had some initial observations. So our plan is, I think, to continue evaluating and collecting information, and the high school starts, at least, in some way, shape, or form, April 15th. So, which is not that far off, it's about a month from now. So shortly after that, we should be able to get a better sense of the traffic flow and the interactions between the Holy Family Church school traffic and the high school traffic, and the issues that are confronting the neighborhood, and potentially come up with some solutions separate and apart from what may have been proposed in the consultant's plan, that may be relatively easy and cost efficient to implement. So making progress, and I think another month or two we'll have more information and can report back. John, anything else?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Abelson. Yeah, as Larry indicated, we went and surveyed the high school in the area around Holy Family School. We talked to former Commissioner Hammond and got her input on what the problems were. We also noted where there is loading and where there isn't loading near the high school. And where you don't provide loading, then they load on other streets. And we heard reports that they were loading on Wallen Avenue, which is a relatively narrow street, even though there are some no parking signs there. But strangely enough, loading is not allowed for the high school along Fremont. It's a lot of red curb right in front of the parking lot, and then southerly of Bank Street. And so that is something we flagged as something we wanted to look further into. And you also indicated that I went out there one was it a Tuesday or Wednesday morning? I can't remember which. But just as I got there, it stopped raining. So I thought it was representative of conditions. But I looked at traffic entering Holy Family School for about a 40-minute period from roughly 7:30 to 8:10. And traffic queues on Ramona Avenue, southerly of Oak Street. They wrap around Oak Street and go east, and then they enter the parking lot. And then they load their students there, and then they exit from the Wallen Street gate. At least that was the flow when I looked at it. Based on photographs and other videos that were provided by Joanne Knuckles, who lives on Ramona Avenue, that showed that some of the vehicles entering the lot on Holy Family were coming out on the Oak Street gate and not the Wallen Street gate. Do I have it backwards? No. Yeah, they're coming out Oak and not Wallen, and therefore they were circling the block and going up Wallen, or up Ramona Avenue between Oak and Wallen, thus disrupting the neighborhood. So it became apparent to me that they ought to proceed all the way through the lot, enter on Oak, go out on Wallen. But that's not what video showed from a few years ago. So I think one of the keys to addressing the issues that the residents brought to our attention near the high school and near Holy Family School is looking at the drop-off areas, looking at the circulation, looking at the vehicular routes to school to see what we can do to minimize impact to the community. I know that the Nelson Nygaard study looked mostly at traffic control devices and public works improvements, such as new access ramps and bulb outs and things like that. And I'm not saying those shouldn't be considered in the future, but I didn't see a lot of those as urgent for addressing some of the needs of circulating traffic. So I think this is something where we're going to continue to look more and more, especially as the high school reopens. And then I think we can see more completely how the two flows to the high school and to Holy Family Church School, how they integrate together and what situation they cause. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. And I'll just conclude by saying that based on what we observed, it certainly appears that there are opportunities to better manage the traffic for both schools, and not only to separate it, but also to keep it off of residential streets much more than is currently the case. Right now the church traffic flow heavily relies upon Ramona and Oak, and there is a distinction between the video we were sent from years ago and what seems to be happening now. But the bottom line is there should be ways to improve the situation for both the residents and the schools without, as Commissioner Fisher mentioned, implementing a number of wildly expensive devices which may not have much impact. So more to come with that. Does anybody have any questions or comments for us before we move forward? Oh, Leon, I apologize. There's a public comment.
Yes, I
Thank
just
you.
have one. It's from Craig Erickson. I live at 1545 Ramona Avenue on the corner of Ramona and Oak. I watch every morning as the cars for Holy Family line up down Ramona and cause traffic and safety issues in the neighborhood. I have reviewed the November 2019 traffic management plan. While it does suggest some reasonable solutions, it does nothing to address the root of the problem. None of these solutions will reduce the traffic flow. The root of the problem is all the traffic from the Holy Family drop-off. There also needs to be better enforcement of drop-off at the high school. I believe that the simplest and most cost-effective solution is to stagger the start times and take away the Holy Family drop-off, especially since 90% of the students are from outside South Pass. They should utilize the 75 spots in their other lot The reason for not doing this is the students having to cross Fremont. Students at every other school in the district cross busy streets every day. Not only is there a traffic light, they can move the nice lady who watches the driveway to the Fremont Oak intersections to act as the crossing guard. While they are very concerned with the safety of their students, they don't seem to have the same concern for the other students and residents of the neighborhood. The parents have a total disregard for the neighborhood and traffic laws. They are constantly making U-turns and stopping in the crosswalks, both on Ramona and Oak. The traffic backup also causes other drivers to lose patience and not make the safest driving choices. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Leona.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, that comment reminded me of something that I forgot to mention when I looked at the situation on the weekday morning. The situation that occurs is about a half-hour situation. If you go at 7:30, there's a small queue of traffic on Oak between Ramona and the Oak Street driveway into the church. As the time progresses at around 7:45 or 7:50, the queue extends all the way along Ramona from south of Oak, and I think that whatever the next street is, I think it's Pine, to south of Pine even. It's the full block and a half long. And then by 8:10, it's gone. So it's a very high peaking all of a sudden that lasts for 30 minutes, and then the peak of the peak is about 10 to 15 minutes. So I call it a situation. We'll have to determine whether that's a problem or not, but it's recognized as a situation. I also did not see any drop off or loading on the lot behind, I think it's called the St. Joseph Center across the street on the east side of Holy Family, and the lot back there. I saw no activity there whatsoever. And again, that might be an opportunity to provide a drop-off area and walk your children across the street to the school. So I think there are some opportunities to look at. I think inevitably there's always going to be some situation on Ramona Avenue, but I think our goal should be to reduce it as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. If there's nothing else on this topic, we will move forward. Seeing none. Okay. So thank you all. So next up we have not a small topic. Number 8 on our agenda, discussion of local return measure M projects for fiscal year 2022. Garrett.
Yeah, so this is a topic of discussion for the commission to go through the previous lists of projects and identify if there's any projects that the commission from those lists that would like the city to focus on, staff to focus on moving forward, or if there's any new ideas. The intention of this is to brainstorm for all of you to discuss the matter and then kind of give staff some direction, or then we can come back at a later date as an action item for the commission to approve for council. So we can move forward with using that Measure M funding for those specific projects.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. And this is a conversation that in and of itself could take hours. So I want to try to see if we can manage it. So included in our agenda packet was a staff report from a prior meeting from June of last year. But a couple months later, there was a more complete report for our, let's see, for, I guess it was, yes, for our August meeting. And I asked I asked staff to circulate that to everyone this afternoon. Hopefully you got it and had at least a chance to survey it. The history also could take a long time to discuss, but at the end of the day, where we are is we have approximately 1.7 million, maybe a hair more, of funds, local return measure M funds from Metro that the city needs to program. We had an original list. That list was changed without public participation. To the list that's in the report that was provided with this agenda packet. Our commission recommended that those projected or those programmed projects be unprogrammed, and they were. And so we're sort of back to square one. So what we have is we have the original list, which is described in what was circulated to you this afternoon. It's pages 11.3 through 11.5 of what was sent to you this afternoon. There's the staff generated list that's included in the packet that was sent out at the end of last week. And then there's the third bucket, which is something in between. Now, on top of that, there are a couple of other considerations. You may remember at our last meeting, Mayor Mahmood mentioned something about the potential need to use these funds as a match for the Rogan funded project, which is the ITS system on Fair Oaks, which is the $9 million that the city secured years ago, originally for the ramp, the new hook ramp. Now it's for this project. At the end of last year, we were advised by our then council liaison, Dr. Schneider, that that issue or that need to use these funds as a match had been resolved, and that was no longer something that needed to be considered. So, and I haven't seen or heard anything since other than Mayor Mahmood's comments. So I am presuming that issue has been resolved, and if not, my personal feeling is that these funds should not be used for that purpose anyway. But I think that ship has sailed. So where we are is, what do we want to do this money? The old projects, the new projects, or something in between? I certainly have my thoughts, but I'm going to go last. So I just wanted to frame the issue and see how people wanted to. And Leona, there's no public comment, right?
You're correct. There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. So if anybody wants to start off, please let me know. Commissioner Hughes.
Just a little background for our newest commissioners. When the first list was developed, it was to look at the city in totality and to look at those what we called pinch points of where traffic was impacted. So we looked at the north at Columbia, we looked over at Garfield, we looked at Huntington, at the south part of Fremont and Huntington. We looked at places that we knew that there were traffic areas that really need mitigation, and looked at, for example, we know Garfield and Oak could use a signal. That's an area of danger and a lot of backup that occurs. We know that in the southbound and also northbound Fremont, Huntington, there are no left-hand turn signals, arrows that could help a lot. And we looked at the problems we have at Columbia, Pasadena Avenue, and we've been told that we can't do any of that because of jurisdiction overlap between Pasadena or San Marino. And I do think there's ways I think that we should be able to solve that. But that was sort of the vision, to look at the city in totality in some of these areas. And so that was kind of what I would say, and please correct me, Chair Abelson or Commissioner Fisher, as the look at developing those projects. I do think there's still value in a lot of that. I do think there's other potential opportunities. Traffic patterns are changing with the pandemic, and what will come back as a new normal, we don't know. But I do think there are areas that we can use the funds to really help the flow with the city. And I do think there's ways to partner with our regional neighbors as we look at the region altogether that we need to keep in consideration. One of the areas I know we wanted to look at was the northern part of Columbia and all of that area, because we understand that Pasadena wants to develop the stub, and we need to partner with Alhambra what they're going to do. So I do think there's opportunities there, and just want to kind of give that framework.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. And I'm just going to correct something I said earlier when I agree with you. There was one project from our original list that staff did not remove and retained when they came up with their list. And that is a new signal at Garfield and Monterey. It's currently always stop controlled, and it creates tremendous backup, and certainly at the peak periods of the day. And it's interesting that Mission and Garfield has a signal, but Monterey and Garfield does not. And it seems to be an area that's screaming for one. And even Director Abbas commented that he thought it would meet the warrants. Because what happens now with backup is traffic is shifted into neighborhoods, which is inappropriate. We had also suggested a signal at Garfield and Oak because of the location. It's a proximity to the Oneonta Church and School, as well as the YMCA and the heavy head traffic there. Excuse me. Director Abbas's concern is that it might not meet warrants, maybe because they're not vehicles crossing. I don't know. I'm not sure that's the case, but maybe if a signal isn't appropriate, then maybe there are other pedestrian controls or safety measures that can be taken there, whether it's RRFBs or something else. But yeah, and then I'm going to get to the hands that, as Commissioner Hughes mentioned, we had a huge list called the Early Action Projects list, which I had circulated to you a month or two ago, and included a number of projects for primarily for Measure R. We looked at that list and took out from that list projects for Measure N that were projects that could be more easily and readily implemented, and that would touch upon areas of the city that were not going to be addressed by the major Measure R projects. You know, the Fremont, the Fair Oaks, the Interchange, and to try to deal with the free for all that is Columbia, the lack of traffic management, traffic management at Garfield, and some of the other areas. So that's sort of, as Kim mentioned, that's the approach we had coming in. So let me get to the hands. Right now, I think I have Commissioner Fisher.
Okay, thank you. We had the list that staff developed, then we had the list that the commission developed. And all projects are good, but it's a matter of priority. And it's a matter of how much do you want to allocate given the limited funding. So the projects that staff came up with, the first one is Meridian Avenue Complete Street. Yes, Meridian Avenue needs attention, and we're hearing good reports from staff working with the community there. I know Garrett's been working closely with them, looking at maintaining some of the traffic control devices and upgrading some of the traffic control devices. So I feel that that issue is being addressed. We don't need to throw a whole lot of money at some complete street when we can address issues in the short term. The second project that staff came up with was the very end of Mission Street at Stony Drive and Arroyo Drive. And there already is I believe, a street resurfacing project scheduled for that section of Mission Street. And it would be very easy to add on to that project a raised channelized right turn island from Mission to Arroyo Drive. That's what it needs. It needs that and a few other treatments, but they could be folded into the resurfacing project there. So I don't think we need to throw money at that as a separate category. The third project that staff came up with was Diamond Avenue and Linden Street intersection near the high school. An odd intersection configuration there, we all acknowledge. When Commissioner Abelson and I went out to look at the situation regarding the high school and Holy Family, we looked at that intersection and we noted that improvements have been made at that location to channelize traffic, to put in an additional stop sign there, to make it as clear as you can, given the odd configuration of the intersection, how traffic is supposed to move there. So I feel some improvements have been made. And the only other improvement that we identified that possibly might be justified, but that would require further study, is the addition of another stop sign for southbound Diamond Avenue. That would not be expensive. So I think staff has done pretty much all that can be done there, with the possible exception of a stop sign. So I would not support having that as a category for major funding from Measure M. The projects that the commission came up with were the projects on Columbia Street to channelize it with a continuous left turn lane from Orange Grove Avenue to just beyond Pasadena Avenue, so that traffic could get into a left turn lane, there could be a through lane that isn't blocked, and there could be right turn lanes as there are now as you turn to go north onto Pasadena Avenue or south onto Fremont Avenue. And it was pointed out in the staff report that that location is not really within the city of South Pasadena, because the city boundary is somewhat near the south curb line. On the other hand, it's the residents who live on the south side of that street who experience the queues every day. So it's something that is experienced every day, and I think it would be easy to clean up by channelizing it with a continuous left turn lane. It was also pointed out that if you, and then there was another project to well, no, it was all related. Columbia Street at Pasadena Avenue, Columbia Street at Orange Grove. It was pointed out in the staff report, if we touch that intersection, we've got to upgrade all the signals. Well, yes and no. You could always phase a project. The first phase could be to channelize it with the left turn lanes. And then the second phase could be at some point to program the signal upgrading. And yes, I agree that the signals need to be upgraded there, but that isn't the most urgent issue we face. The staff report pointed out that the intersection of Garfield and Oak, where we had recommended a traffic signal, was not justified. Okay, if that's what the data shows, then I accept the staff recommendation on that. But I hope that they do have data to back up their assessment of that. But at Garfield and Monterey Road, it is intuitively obvious that that intersection would probably meet the warrants for traffic signal control. And even though that intersection is shared with our adjacent city of San Marino, I think that would be a welcome addition to clean up the long queues of traffic that wait there unnecessarily. So I think that is a justified project. And there was one other, doing something about Grevillea Street at Fair Oaks Avenue, because of the situation that we warned staff about before the construction was completed, that you're building such an odd curb return and access ramp at the northeast corner of Grevillea and Fair Oaks, that it was cumbersome for pedestrians, and drivers would hit it, as skid marks show they have, because of the radius is too tight. So if you push the striping to the south, as is feasible to do, you could get an acceptable curb return so that you don't hit the curb, and that 2 lanes of traffic can make the right turn, one to get on the freeway and one to continue on Fair Oaks Avenue without the danger of them sideswiping each other. So we felt that that improvement would be justified for the use of these funds. So I think the ideas, most of the ideas that the commission had suggested from several months ago are valid. And from my perspective, I would like to see them pursued, because they'll give short-term relief to problems that have existed for some time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Anybody else want to chime in at this point? Commissioner Dunlap.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Fisher, for that, the history of the projects. I think kind of coming into this new, it's certainly helpful to hear the background of some of these recommendations, and no doubt, like, hearing these concerns, and Commissioner Fisher reminds us that some of these are experienced day to day by a lot of community members, and I have no doubt that these are valid projects. I guess coming into this, it's a little, and this is maybe just a suggestion for staff. It's kind of tough to like come up with a recommended list for projects, really not knowing kind of what the city has in mind, like what projects does the city have in the queue that are unfunded, that need to be programmed for funding, that we could use Measure M funds for. If I were to throw out my wish list of projects, I would, and I'm not certainly, we certainly don't have to program them as part of Measure M, but maybe in the future for something to consider. We have several uncontrolled, uncontrolled marked crosswalks across Huntington Drive and one across Fair Oaks Avenue. And the ones across Huntington are at Court Street, Wayne, Maple, and then we have an uncontrolled marked crosswalk at Spruce. Like to me, I feel like those are liabilities to the city. For a pedestrian to run across the street, I particularly, I see close calls at Spruce Street. I live kind of around the corner from there, and there are bus stops, and to cross at Huntington is out of your way, and you have to, the cycling's kind of tricky that there is some delay. And so at some point, maybe down the line, I would like to see some project come along to really enhance the safety of those crossings in a very serious way, whether that be at minimum like an RFB and potentially some intersection tightening, or either really maybe a Hawk signal. I know that there's some regional resistance from traffic engineers to Hawks, but a benefit is that you don't have to cut through traffic. Regarding Garfield at Oak, I'm probably not somewhat disagreeable with the signal there. Talking with residents on Oak Street, they have a lot of concerns with speeding, and a lot of that is cut through traffic. Kind of people traveling from the high school area, cutting across Oak and maybe trying to get over to Huntington. And especially as you get a little more east on Oak, I would want to make sure that, if we were to recommend installing a signal there, that it wouldn't kind of induce any sort of demand on Oak Street. But I'll say somewhat, I'll defer to my fellow commissioners' previous discussions with some of these projects and their priority kind of coming into it, not really maybe understanding what's in the queue for the city, and what should be prioritized above that. And I mean, another project that, I could come up with projects all night long. We could be here to midnight. I think about Fair Oaks and Fremont. The northeast corner is not, you can't, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're a person using a wheelchair, you can't get across the street. It's not.
Sorry, Fair Oaks and.
I'm not Fair Oaks and Fremont. I'm sorry. Fremont at Huntington, in front of the Barclays. If you're in a wheelchair, you can't get through there, and that's an ADA concern. And that intersection, we have curve access ramps that aren't updated to ADA standards. So there are a number of really great projects in the city, and and these funds are certainly much needed. And did you say that the Measure M funds would not be needed for the Rogan Funds project, or is that still up in the air?
Well, I'll see if staff or Councilmember Primuth wants to weigh in, but my understanding is that issue's been resolved and closed. Okay. And we were supposed to identify funding by the end of last year. So we're well into March now. So I'm assuming that issue's resolved, but.
Yeah, because if there needs to be a match for the Rogan Fund source, I think there are probably a number of funding sources that would be eligible for that. There are transit improvements as part of that project. So potentially, if there are Prop A, Prop C funds that could be possibly used as a match, as well as measure-in funds are certainly available. I'm not so convinced that the curb extensions can't be enhanced as part of that Rogan funds project, especially if you're breaking concrete and you're installing curb ramps and you're installing new poles at some of those locations. If you're going to put in that Rogan fund, if you're going to use that Rogan funds money when you go through there, you might as well like update some of those and make some of those a little better. And so I'll stop there, and I know we don't want to be here all night, but I think those are my initial reactions. I think I'll say with somewhat the limited information on what's in the queue for the city.
Well, that's great. That's very helpful. Thank you. Councilmember Primuth.
I'm sorry to jump in, but I'm going to channel Director Abbas, who I spoke with on this. We have not, the city has not identified the matching funds for the Rogan projects. In fact, it is still very much an unresolved issue. So what Mayor Mahmood conveyed to you and what Director Abbas would convey to you if he were here is that the Rogan match is still something that needs to be decided by the city council. It could be part of what you recommend for the Measure M, in addition to all these projects. But if you choose not to recommend using these funds as a match, then the city council will move forward with and try to find other funds. I've heard from Chair Abelson and Director Dunlap their opinions that these Measure M funds would not be, in their view, the right match for the Rogan funds. I think it'd be important for the commission to weigh in on that, and then you can, work on the project list. But it'd be good to at least have the commission understand that it would be helpful to the council to have you weigh in that this slate of funding should not be matched to the Rogan project.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you for that. Commissioner Hughes.
One point I'd like to share is this list was developed in the fall of the original early action, per se, fall of 2017. So we're going, we're getting 4 years plus out. And one of the concerns was in getting rid of the 710 freeway, tunnel, all of that was that the community of South Pasadena would be done with that fight, and funds that traditionally went through the legal battles and millions of dollars over the years to fight, money could now go to really improving transportation, quality of life issues within the city of South Pasadena. And that's one of the reasons to take a global view and say the city needs some relief now. And we know we've heard the problems with Fremont and Meridian and Del Rey and all these different streets where we hear of speeding, traffic, lack of infrastructure. And I just think that part of our issues get to be where we got to get projects done. We need to show action. We need to take concrete steps, and we need to address traffic, parking, mobility, all of it within the city. And I worry that if we keep saying it's going to go to something that's synchronization, just Fair Oaks, that's a problem, because I think people have seen money go to Fair Oaks. It wasn't that long ago that we had the somewhat catastrophe of the Fair Oaks Improvement Project and how that went, which was the foundation of creating the Public Works Commission in the first place. And there's the community at large. So I just want us to keep in mind sort of the framework and time frame for everything, and sort of how we need to look at this from a very 30,000 feet perspective, and how we use these funds and how we start showing the community that we are addressing. I mean, I remember when our entire budget for sidewalks and roads was $8,000 for the city going back, and because we didn't have it. And we had put a lot of money into the sidewalks and cities and capital improvements in the last decade, but transportation and fighting the 710 was something that we did and spent a lot of money on. And part of getting rid of and putting the freeway to bed was so that we could now spend money and concentrate and take Measure M funds, Measure R funds, grant funds, and really put them down at the street level. So people really saw changes in the community in a positive way. So I just want to really emphasize that point.
Thank you.
I agree, and
Commissioner.
I think that's why part of the reason why I brought up the Rogan Funds project at the last meeting. I think understanding more the components of that project will help us then advise on what other funding sources can be used for that match. If we have if there are ITS improvements, or if there are transit improvements, those then become eligible for some of these other funding sources that can be used to sort of supplement that match.
Yeah, good point. And I was looking at, and then I'll get to Commissioner Fisher, a presentation I think was given to council towards the end of last year when I thought this issue was resolved, but apparently it wasn't. That multiple alternatives were suggested in addition to taking the Measure M funds, which were already programmed for other projects, seeking matching funds for Metro, looking to our either undesignated fund reserves or general fund reserves. So there are other alternatives, and I agree with Councilmember Primuth with the information he's just provided. I think we should certainly make sure we're all on the same page that as to what these funds should, whether the funds should be used as a match or not, and then assuming we're all on the same page with whatever that decision is, that then we move on with the suggested projects. And thank you, Councilmember Primuth, for that. Commissioner Fisher.
I just wanted to add on to what Commissioner Hughes said regarding how we develop these projects. I think our intention back in 2017 was to provide improvements at various points along the corridor. And that's why we came up with improvements on Columbia, at Orange Grove, and at Pasadena Avenue, because that's part of the 710 corridor coming down from Pasadena. And that's why we came up with improvements proposed for Garfield Avenue, because Garfield is a north-south street that feeds the north-south 710 corridor. We also wanted to distribute these improvements in various areas of the community. So that's why we had several different areas. And that's why I would personally be reluctant to concentrate all this funding as a match for the Fair Oaks Avenue signal synchronization. I'm fully supportive of signal modernization, synchronization, and upgrading our signals. But I think there may be other funding opportunities available to do that. And also, I've been honest in my assessment that the $8 million or $9 million for the upgrading of 12 signals along Fair Oaks Avenue has a lot of play in it, maybe a lot of fat in it. You can scale that up or down any way you wish to. And I base that on my experience in implementing the ADSAC program when I was with the city of LA. So while I support the signal synchronization and the modernization and the upgrading, I think it may not need the full $9 million. And therefore we may be able to scale it back just a tad if we have a problem with coming up with a match. But I would support finding other options to provide a match for the signals on Fair Oaks Avenue.
So is it, thank you, Commissioner Fisher. So is it accurate to say that the members of this commission, oh, and I see Commissioner Liu has a comment, so let's go to him first.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Chair Abelson, please finish your.
Oh, okay.
agreement.
So, well, thank you. So I just wanted to make sure we had an understanding that it's the consensus of this commission that the Measure M funds of approximately 1.7 million allocated to the city not be used as a match for the Rogan project. Is that, is there any objection to that? Okay, no. So that, go ahead.
Go ahead, Don.
All right, I have I don't know if it's an objection. It would be a shame to lose this much money, because I do believe that even though the Fair Oaks Avenue project seems a little on the high end, but I don't know synchronization projects as well as the rest of you. I feel like it would solve a lot of problems in the north-south corridor, even though it is concentrated along Fair Oak, since that is a corridor that we are trying to redirect a lot of our traffic to. I guess my question is how realistic are we about finding other sources to match this fund? Or if we decide to use these Measure M funds for these more localized projects, how likely are we to just lose out on these Rogan funds?
Well, I'll see if Commissioner Fisher has his hand up, so
Yeah,
let's
I
go to
don't
him.
want to cut in on what you wanted to say, Larry, but to me, it's not the issue of are we going to give up the Rogan funds, because this is already reprogrammed money because we didn't implement a revised on-ramp to the parkway. So since we didn't do that, they say you're going to lose your funds, come up with something else. And we came up with signal synchronization. So I think we all agree that has to move forward. As to what scale, there could be a little bit of debate on that. But I think the only issue is what are we going to use for the matching funds, not if we are going to have matching funds.
Yeah, 100%. So with that understanding, Commissioner Liu, what are your thoughts?
With that understanding, I'm in agreement with the rest of the commission. Then, if there are other funds to, fund a synchronization project, then yeah, that makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And good question. So I think we have consensus there.
Thank you all.
And Commissioner Dunlap is raising his physical hand.
I would like to add, I understand that there are, certainly budget challenges that any city or any agency faces. And I know that there are probably a lot of social services that don't receive as much funding as transportation. So, I want to acknowledge that. And I would say I strongly prefer that the Measure M funds are not used for it, but I certainly do understand if there, if some portion of it needs to help because of some other like more pressing need citywide.
Okay, thank you for that. So, okay, I think there's enough said on that. Commissioner Hughes?
Just that, and I guess Councilmember Primuth could address that, but I do know that we had certain amount of capital funds in our capital budget that were carried over and such, other than the undesignated. So I thought potentially we could cover, if we needed to, matching the Rogan funds potentially. But then to kind of dovetail onto what Commissioner Dunlap said, should we find ourselves saying, okay, these are the 5 key projects we want for Measure M funds. And if we had to say, okay, we'll take the top 3, we'll forget these others because we want to utilize some of those funds to go to the Rogan. Is that a potential kind of a cut the baby in half opportunity?
Unfortunately, Director Abbas is not here, so I can't really tell you what's on the designated list. I do know that there's spending authority for the match. We have an RFP that we're going to have to accept and fund. So it's going to be out of designated reserves or general reserves if the commission doesn't have a priority for the local match. So that's about as far as I can tell you as far as understanding. So I think what I heard here tonight is great, and I because I think the commission is really focused on these specific projects. I'd love to hear your discussion as you kind of sort through all the other projects, and if for example there's a need to designate some portion to the Rogan Fund, I think Director Abbas will alert you, and you might be able to address that at a future meeting.
Just to dovetail that, do we need to consider this, or where is all this kind of fitting in? As I know, but obviously the South Pasadena, great story regarding how the budget's looking and that we'll have a budget. And I guess the question is, how does this then roll into the budget allocation? And maybe Garrett, you've been working on that potentially, or I guess I'm trying to think of timing. Like if we want to look at these projects again with the discussion we've had tonight in mind, can this roll over into the next April meeting where there also might be clarity on matching funds as undesignated as well as capital improvement projected, now that we know we're going to actually have a physical budget because the final audit will be done and the projections of where our revenues are, et cetera, which was looking good, where we might be to feel what's realistic. And then maybe we can put together a priority list of these are our top 5 at this amount of money. And if we had to drop 2, we would drop, because they're all not going to be done in, a month. Now, how far and putting the money to the Rogan, whether the money has to be done at one time or is it done in installments? That I don't know.
So I'm not sure, like if we would pay the match all at once, or if it would be, typically working within these programs, it's done more incrementally, but I'm not 100% sure on this particular one, so I'll get back to you on that. But as for the capital budget, for now, if it wasn't already funded and in progress, and it had any general fund dollars, it was stopped. We haven't moved forward with it. Now, when the budget is we'll find out tomorrow how everything goes and where we're at more definitively. But then, yes, we would have a better idea, of where our capital program is at, and then where are some funded. So we may be able to use the Measure M funding on projects that we kind of already have in the pipeline through the capital program. That we have about a 5-year program that we're proposing. So once council approves that is also an option. So if you wish to kind of table this discussion for now, and we could come back with more financial information next meeting, that would be perfectly acceptable to staff.
So I'm just going to add a piece of information, then go to Commissioner Dunlap. Among the sources of funding for the Rogan project is 20 years ago, something like that. $5 million was secured from the MTA to use as local matching funds for the Rogan projects. Excuse me. It would be, and this is not a public works issue, it would be interesting to hear from the finance folks. Has that money been allocated to other projects, or is it still, or some portion of it still available for this Rogan project, which has not yet been implemented? So we can go whatever direction the commission wants to go. I'm concerned that this is an opportunity, as Commissioner Hughes mentioned, to implement projects in areas of the city that have been, for lack of a better word, ignored for years, decades. And we have tens of millions allocated to a particular corridor, but zero, as we sit here, funded to deal with Columbia, Garfield, and the other issues that were previously identified. And to just throw this money in and say, well, we need it for the Rogan project, so here's another 2 million gone. Well, then we're not going to be able to implement anything. So it seems like there are enough other sources of funds that the city council can tap into to match. And Measure M funds were never intended for this purpose. And let me also mention that just because we or the city decides to do something, it doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, because there's a joint powers authority that has to review and approve all of this. John might even be our representative. I'm not sure. Yeah. So keep that all in mind. And we are not the finance department for the city. That's another commission. So I just want to make sure we're keeping our eyes focused on our charge. So with that, Commissioner Dunlap.
I will ask a hybrid mobility / finance question. Garrett, Garrett, are you aware, are there any overlapping projects with Fair Oaks? So resurfacing, reconstruction projects, you know, any one of the approaches or the stems? The reason I'm asking is are you using like RMRA funds for those? Because if you are, you know, maybe like sometimes you get creative and projects get combined, and you know, like SB or like RMRA funds can be used as part of this project for a match. You know, maybe RMRA or SB1 can fund the updating the curb extensions, you know what I mean, which could help update the concrete work as part of the Rogan Funds project. And you know, would that count towards the match? I guess.
Well, I'm not familiar with the first one you mentioned, but I know for SB1 we haven't met our MOE, so I don't know where that exactly is or if there would be some forgiveness. But from what I understand is the commission doesn't want to use the Measure M funds for the local match, and that's not a, you know, we can take that direction. That's no problem. And it seems like that you would like us to concentrate on Garfield and Columbia, if that's, you know,
I think my experience is sometimes with projects, sometimes you combine a bunch of projects, you know, and sometimes the projects are funded by a bunch of different funding sources, and you get a little creative with the funding, and sometimes that,
right. And that's not something I'm that familiar with to be able to tell you. I know we have a lot of overlapping projects on Fremont, and there are a couple of projects on Fair Oaks, but I'm not that familiar with all of the different funding sources and what we can and can't use them for. That would be something I would work with Shahid in the finance department on, what we can and can't do. So I definitely 100% support being creative. I think thinking outside of the box and asking questions and making someone tell you no is a great, you know, way to do it. It's just as long as we have the time to go down those avenues.
Okay.
So I want to throw something else in that in Commissioner Fisher's terrific summary earlier. One thing that was he didn't cover was one of the projects that staff had proposed. I think the final nail in the coffin is there on the staff proposed projects. But on the Monterey one, I just want to make sure everybody understands that the Monterey Complete Streets concept, that was one of the 3 staff proposed items, that the neighbors were against it. So for that reason alone, it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest money and time on a project that the neighbors don't support. So that project, in addition with those 2 locations that John talked about, Mission Arroyo and Diamond Linden, I think, and I'm open to hearing differently, obviously, but it seems like those projects don't make a lot of sense, and probably don't have a lot of support, at least from this commission. And that what I'm hearing from everyone is that we're redirecting staff back to the original list that was recommended and approved by City Council. To the extent cooperation with other cities is required, I don't think that's an impediment. I think that we've successfully worked with our neighbors before. And if we're funding a project that benefits both sides of the street, I think that that's something that would be supported. You know, Columbia is a no man's land free-for-all right now that is screaming for help. And because it's shared by both cities, nothing's been done. And I think we have some funding to make some incremental improvements that would help manage and direct traffic there. It seems to make sense. Garfield Monterey signal seems to be supported, whether it's a traffic signal or some ped improvement at Garfield and Oak seems to make sense. Like Commissioner Dunlap said, maybe a signal maybe isn't the best idea. Maybe it's either it's not warranted, or if it is, maybe we don't want to induce traffic. So maybe some enhanced pedestrian support there at Garfield and Oak, because right now it's in roadway flashers and we know how terrific those are. And then I want to pick up on Commissioner Dunlap's notes on those intersections, those ped crossings along Huntington, which I guess are nothing more than striped. If there's something we can do with RFBs or something at those locations, I think there were 3 on Huntington that you identified that those are something that
Yeah, I think
perhaps we
3 on
should include?
Huntington, and then there's one on Fair Oaks on crossing at Spruce right north of
Okay.
Huntington.
Then maybe those are those are good opportunities. And then, part of the original list was some bike lane work, to say it very non-technically. And I'm wondering if, Fair Oaks south of Monterey to Huntington, 3 lanes in each direction, speed issues up the wazoo, and no bike lane, nothing. So I'm wondering, and I'm interested to see what the commission says. What do we think about looking at a striping project on Fair Oaks between Monterey and Huntington that takes away the number, I guess you would call it the number 3 travel lane, and converts it to a bike lane? I guess it would be a class 2, and I think that's already part of some plan. So it's just a striping project to reduce from 3 lanes to 2 the travel lanes and insert a bike lane, and perhaps give bikers a safe passage, and also maybe manage speeds a bit and manage traffic a bit. What do you guys think about that? Those who are still awake.
I just think the only problem I think that's come up with Fair Oaks there is that the road condition is so poor that we probably, it's not good. And I know that Mayor Mahmoud has mentioned it about the condition of the road itself down there, whether we need to consider that. And I know that's pretty expensive. So if we were going to stripe, we probably might want to do some improvements. So I don't know where that price tag is.
Good point. Commissioner Liu.
I'm a little hesitant to do a lane reduction at that location, depending on kind of where future Fair Oaks projects end up in terms of capacity. But also just from a bike lane perspective, I would love bike lanes there, but I feel like it would create bigger issues later if we're trying to connect a bike lane north of Monterey, because the glaring thing about putting bike lanes there, which is a good idea, and I would use them, is that we would need to connect them eventually, if not sooner rather than later, to Fair Oaks north of Monterey. Having a disconnected bike lane network doesn't make sense, and I don't know if that's I don't know if that would be ideal. I think it might create problems for us later on in terms of trying to fit bike lanes north of Monterey or connected to non-existent bike lanes on Monterey. So those are just my initial thoughts on that. But it is a good idea, but there's a little bit of a can of worms situation for me.
No, those are great comments. Commissioner Fisher.
Yeah, I was going to agree with Commissioner Liu. Bike lanes might fit there, and I think it's something that should be looked at. I haven't come to any firm conclusion on that, but I think the other thing is that bike lanes have to go from somewhere to somewhere, and not just put them in because they can fit. But if we had bike lanes on Huntington and if we had bike lanes on Monterey Road, that might be a rationale for putting bike lanes south of Monterey Road on Fair Oaks. But one of the other problems is that we can't ever stripe bike lanes north of Monterey Road because of the way the gutter was built, 10 feet outside the curb line. While in dry times, you can ride that gutter as a pseudo bike lane. You can't mark it as a bike lane. So that's an impediment as well. So I think it's something that could be looked at, but there's some pros and cons to it.
All right, I say strike it.
Commissioner I think Commissioner Abelson, it's something that should be considered, and potentially, I don't know, could you do like a protected bike lane through there? And I know that there's an upcoming, is there an upcoming project on Huntington, like some of the 710, wasn't there a grant project on Huntington? I feel like everything's connected. Maybe we will be putting bike lanes on Huntington, and then maybe that will be a time to revisit that.
The city does have a bike master plan, and I'd be more than happy to share it with the commission if you haven't seen it already.
But is there a complete streets project coming up on Huntington? No? Okay,
So,
never mind.
I appreciate those comments, and I'm going to say we can back burner it. I just wanted everybody to chime in, and I'm going to throw the one thing out, and then I know Commissioner Hughes has something to say. So I want to circle back to what we heard hours ago at the public comment, during the public comment, regarding the issues on Orange Grove south of Columbia. And we've already talked about Columbia generally between west of Fair Oaks, our northern boundary, and the issues there. What do folks think about using some of this money to address, at least short term, some of the safety issues and concerns that have been raised on Orange Grove south of Columbia? And then Commissioner Hughes, please share your comments as well, but I wanted to throw that idea out there.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I was going to chime in and say one of the things that was to, when we look at how we want to move traffic, one of the premises was to always get traffic that's coming up Fremont, get them to go over to Fair Oaks and continue on Fair Oaks and incentivize them with the synchronization lights, and then hopefully also improve with the loop ramp. But one of the things that was on our list was also the left-hand turn signals on Huntington north and south, which was to hopefully get, again, traffic moving the proper ways and not back up. So I think that's one of the important projects to keep on our list, if you will. But I also want to mention what you just did allude to was perhaps we do look at some of this money for rethinking the striping, the signing, other mitigation things that we could do to help Orange Grove in the corridor from Columbia to the 110.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think if there's nothing else, Garrett, do you have a fairly impressive list of ideas?
Yeah, no, I do. And this is what we were looking for as this was a brainstorming session. And I think, yeah, I think definitely the pot of different things we have to look at is good. And we can, staff will kind of crunch everything down. And we know that the commission wants to use Measure M funding for projects. And we will move forward with that in mind, looking at Garfield and Columbia first. And then I did meet with city engineering staff this morning to look at some of the short-term measures, signage, lane merge, chevrons, some raised pavement markers, stuff like that, to bring people's attention to the matters that are affecting Orange Grove between Columbia and the freeway. So I think we have that. We can do that, within the next month or so, hopefully, if everything moves quickly. So I think anything beyond that, we could potentially look at Measure M funding for, but for short-term stuff, the staff has that in the budget because it's relatively inexpensive, pavement markers and signs. But no, all great ideas. And I think we can come back and maybe not next month's meeting, but in a month or so with a smaller list that then you all would recommend to council, and then we could move forward with getting the funding approved through Metro and everything for the projects.
That sounds great. Thank you for that. Commissioner Liu, your hand goes up and down. I'm going to call on you anyway.
So, I know it's getting late, but just before we develop this list, I do want to. I know we Commissioner Fisher earlier spoke about the effectiveness of the Meridian improvements. I do have some questions about not just Meridian, but some other of these projects, just high level. With only 1.7 million, if we're trying to fund construction with some of these, with these funds, I'm not sure how far that would go. And I guess I would urge caution when evaluating how far this money would actually go when we're looking at some of these projects. So just thinking about the Meridian project, I'm looking at the number of 922,000. That number actually seems not unbelievable to me, especially if the number is based on a potential traffic circle or a roundabout or medians or some other concrete work along that corridor. But yes, I guess as I just want to make sure that Meridian's still somewhat on the list, just to kind of see what potential improvements and whether, if these are effective improvements that could be, I don't know, easily implemented, but have a really positive effect, then, I think it's up there with Garfield.
So just to clarify, and I know Commissioner Dunlap has a comment. I believe the consensus is that the proposed $920,000 project is not something that we want staff to pursue. Is that your understanding, Commissioner Liu?
That was initially my
Or do you have a
understanding,
different
but,
opinion?
well, I just wanted to, I guess, make sure before we kind of deprioritize this one compared to, Columbia, which I think is a good project. I just wanted to clarify kind of what some of these feasible improvements are, because when I look at some of these projects, I don't know if whether exploring Orange Grove between Columbia and the freeway, like I can't envision what the feasible improvements would be on that road. I'm sure city staff will come up with something much more innovative, but I guess just top of mind is, what would these improvements or projects that we're trying to fund look like, or even consist of? I know for some of them, they're much more straightforward, like signals that makes sense to me, such as at Garfield and Monterey. I think that's an easy one to get behind. So yeah, I guess my question is, before we lower Meridian, is what is that 922,000 really based on? I mean, I can sort of envision it, but without knowing more about it, I can't really say one way or another.
Okay, no, that's good comments. And I think you do not have the benefit of a presentation that was given to us last year by staff about what was proposed. And it was a pretty comprehensive set of measures, virtually every tool you could think of to make Meridian more bike, pedestrian, neighborhood resident friendly, and perhaps less attractive for cars, whether it's curb extensions, chokers, all kinds of interesting, creative, expensive devices that residents don't want. And I don't think anybody here on this commission is saying we're walking away from Meridian. I think everybody's well aware of the fact that it needs additional help, whether it's stop signs or whatever it is. I just think that what we're talking about now is that what staff was proposing for almost $1 million, when compared to the other needs and the other projects and the support they have versus what this one has, that maybe this one isn't one that should be pursued. But if you think staff should be looking at something for Meridian, then, let's clarify that. Is that what you're saying?
A little bit, but it seems like we already have a pretty good list of projects that seem much more feasible. So I'm okay with leaving Meridian a little further down on the list from Garfield and Columbia.
Okay, and we're continuing this conversation, right? They're going to come back, and so Commissioner Dunlap's been waiting.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing to Commissioner Lewis. Some of these complete streets improvements, they they start to become eligible for other funding sources like safe clean water funds. When you start, you know, looking to maybe install stormwater capture elements in your curb extensions or in those chokers, you know, like perhaps there are other funding sources that might become available, you know, to fund some of these complete streets improvements on streets like Meridian or others throughout the city. I just wanted to make that comment for Garrett. I know that's a new funding source, but a lot of jurisdictions are starting to really collaborate and say, you know, how can we have multi-benefit projects where we are adding pedestrian and bike elements while we're actually trying to capture a ton of stormwater.
Yeah, no, you're right. Stormwater and transit are probably going forward will be the two biggest funding sources for any kind of projects, any, you know, mobility projects moving forward. They really are. And if you can design a stormwater capture, retention, filtration, groundwater recharge to your project, there should be a lot of money in the future for stuff like that. At least according to a couple of the talks and conferences I've been to.
Remember,
Great, okay.
cisterns.
What was that?
Remember cisterns.
Okay, so on that note, so Garrett, you have it. We're good.
Yeah,
Okay,
if I need clarification
everybody-
or anything, I'll reach out. But I have the priority list based on the old lists. Staff will have some discussions about it, and we'll come back to you in a meeting or two and have you recommend that list to council so we can move forward with the Measure M projects.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all. It was a terrific discussion. And if there's nothing further, seeing nothing. All right. Moving on. Councilmember Primuth, City Council liaison comments or communications, excuse me.
I just have one, and that's tomorrow night's agenda is the budget for 2020 to 2021, which is almost spent, but we'll fix it. We'll put a budget on it and call it good. So, and then we begin working on next year's budget as well. I anticipate there'll be some more digging down into the reserves, the different set aside designated reserves, because with 3 new council members, you know, we need to know what's the rationale behind all of that. So, you know, the fiscal picture in which you guys you're operating as you decide Measure M funds versus how do we do the Rogan match. Hopefully you'll have enough council decision to create the staff context to give you, or at least the staff information to give you a context for your next meeting. So hopefully we can help you help us.
Great. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the budget. It's been a long time coming. Commissioner communications. Just raise your hand, Commissioner Dunlap.
Yeah, one thing that I noticed is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I know that there was the drive-through food distribution at Holy Family, and I guess in partnership with the Supervisor Barger's office. And I walked by during that time, and I'm not sure, Garrett, if that was your team or who at the city, but I felt like it was really organized, and you know, the food pickup drop off was well organized. There was personnel to really assist with like crossing at the intersections. The signing was really clear, and so I know that those efforts, you know, working for an agency staff often go unnoticed. But I just want to commend if it was your team that worked on the city, it's how well run it seemed, especially like the traffic control around it. And just kind of acknowledge the sacrifice too that the residents made on that street to give up their parking for a couple hours to make that event happen.
Well, that's great. That makes me feel good. I like that. Thank you, Commissioner Dunlap. It's all Garrett. If it was positive, it was Garrett. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of things. I just wanted to thank everyone, because last fall I came to you and made a plea for the UUT, and the UUT passed. And it was nice to know that the help of the UUT and the Measure A with the sales tax has really helped the city. And it was nice to see that, the public and the community coming together and really continuing to support the city. And that's helped in the pandemic. And it was interesting in juxtaposition to see that our sister city, San Marino, did not pass their recent parcel tax, and it did not pass. So that's going to hit them, and it was hitting, going as I understand it was that funding was going for teachers and a lot of real basics, and they're going to feel that. But I appreciate the fact that we as a community and the people that even the staff and team, and that we're all one family, and that we continue to support each other and put our money where our mouth is. And it's nice to know that through those efforts, it's really helped the city weather the pandemic. And I think we're going to come out even stronger as we continue into this year and put a new budget together and go forward with no 710.
Terrific. Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. That's wonderful. Commissioners Fisher or Lou, anything? And don't feel obligated. I just want to make sure you have a chance.
I have nothing.
Okay.
I have nothing as well.
Okay. So I always have something. So I'm just going to be quick. I had one thought that crossed my mind over the past month, and it was illuminated by the comments at the top of this meeting earlier today. And that is that it would seem to be helpful if on some kind of a regular basis, accident data was shared with this commission. It would be helpful, I think, because a lot of what we've done either on this commission or the prior commission it's been based on anecdotal information or personal experience, for example, which led to the new signal at Orange Grove and Monterey. But I think it would be helpful, and just something to think about. Maybe a staff can kick it around with SPPD, if it might be helpful to get some kind of regular reporting on that. So we have a sense of where are the hotspots. Are there hotspots? Are there intersections or locations that continue to be a safety concern? And so it's not just about multiple people submitting public comments that bring it to our attention, or staff or city council, but perhaps if we can get the data to find out, something we need to look at. So just a thought. Second, a positive note along the lines of prior comments, in traveling to the intersection of Garfield and Oak today to take a look at what was there in terms of pedestrian safety warnings. It was very heartwarming to see the kids walking to Marengo Elementary School this morning. How fantastic to see signs of life and some sense of normalcy returning to our community. It was just, I never thought I would be so excited to see something like that happen. And it's just, it was wonderful. It was just terrific. And the school crossing guard at Oak and Marengo, the whole thing, it was just wonderful. So yay for progress. And then something just to ask Councilmember Primuth going forward, and not to do anything tonight, but it might be helpful when City Council takes action on projects and includes as conditions or whatever you want to call them in approving a project, when they talk about, oh, well, you're going to need to go back to MTIC at some point for a traffic survey or a parking study, or to get their input on X, Y, or Z. It would be, I know about it because I hear it from people and I happen to have seen that part of the meeting, the video. But it would be great if just going forward, if you could share with us when that happens, so that it's on our radar going forward, that, hey, we should be on the lookout for issues we're going to have to deal with on 7 patios, for example. That is all I had.
I will certainly let you know what you volunteered for. Or what we volunteered you for.
There you go. Thank you. If no other council member comments, we will jump to staff.
So
Anything further?
just one quick thing. I'll continue to promote these at all the commissions I'm at. Is the city does have a donate a tree program. It's $350. You can give us a couple of species suggestion and locations, and we'll take that donation and plant a tree in your honor or in someone else's honor if you'd like. So it's a really great program to help establish a verdant and eclectic urban forest that can be safe and healthy.
That's wonderful. And thanks for the reminder. Every time you tell us I plan to do it, and then I forget. So thank you for that. Leona, anything further? No, get me out of here. Okay. Well,
one
it's,
question.
sorry.
Councilmember
Commissioner Hughes.
Privet, have we heard anything about meetings being back into person, back in with in-person meetings?
Nothing that I've heard.
Okay. Because I miss everybody. I want to bring cookies.
Me too. That's right. We miss Kib's goodies at every meeting. That's been over a year, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much. I think we've come at long last to the end of our agenda. Terrific meeting, and thank you to Garrett and Leona for hanging in there with us, and John as well, and everyone. So with nothing further, I'll Brendan for attending, and see you soon.
St. Patrick's Day.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. You too.